do links. And they're like, oh yeah, that's where we use client. It's like the one place. And I was like, okay, we're not, and it's super awkward because if you have a bunch of anchors on your page, you've just defined 100 different serialization entry points. You've just blown up your serialization because you now have all these new client entry points. Anchors and forms are like basically the bane of like these client component architectures from serialization standpoint. That's the way, real HTML elements and attributes, and playing to ARIA. Yeah. I mean, if there's some better TypeScript tricks to use here, I'd love to see them. I'd be stoked. Okay, so yeah, so like what this does. Well, the challenge with this is, sure, we can delegate events, but how do we know all the anchors are on the page? So I actually had to change the Solid compiler. So there's an API that's when either Solid renders anchors or forms, or server components morph into anchors or forms, we actually call like an event. I was thinking about using a DOM event, but it was cleaner to like, we have an API and then a router like this one that cares about it. Like you can obviously just use the classic anchor things, but then, you know, but then like a server component or whatever, like won't see it. Like if you build your router with capital link and then you render it on the server, it's like, there's no client interactivity to change the like current page active class when it updates. So instead what I did was, as I said, all Solid's actually base compiler basically has a claims API that you can register, and the router listens for these anchors and forms, and then it has it. And then since it has it, it's able to apply this convention that it wanted to around this. The convention's up to you. This is not, see, this is a perfect example of where you can create like a protocol at the core level, like saying, hey, you know, here's the navigation things you need to know about, and then let the router or the third-party library set their own conventions on how they want to manage these things. Beautiful trick. What it means is that that you can literally click an anchor in a server component rendered part, like the inert part, and it still gets the right class stuff happening to it, and it delegates the event up, bubbles up to the router, which can still trigger a client-side navigation. As I said, this is not, people, all you HTMX guys out there, you're like, yeah, we've been doing this forever. But this is the place for that kind of navigation. Navigation like forms and anchors are special. So they should be handled like at a lower platform level, like the Solid core, rather than the router. So router is about other conventions, route matching, all, you know, these kind of other pieces that go to it. Well, because that would turn it into being a client component, right? It automatically becomes a new serialization boundary. Like you'd have to like, it'd be a new hydration point on the document. And because we have no use client in our server component model, like intentionally, you have to pass all your client components through the server components. That means that almost everyone who designs a server component would literally have like propped anchor being passed in. And honestly, I hate capital anchor because, like, let's face it, I want this should be built in. And then when you have your custom component library that you use, you know, maybe you don't use server components, you don't care about that, but you have your custom component library that you use that like wraps it or something, your design system or whatever, then you get this anchor ability still for free without any kind of weird composition, right? This is not router specific. How do we get preloading with simple anchor tags? Do we wrap it ourselves? No, preloading works even. That's the beautiful thing, because we registered the claims. You can be on a server component, hover over the anchor, and preloading works because it's delegated. Hover is an event, right? So yeah, preloads work. All the client side fanciness works. like even like server actions, like forms, only run in the server components. You can submit those server action forms from a server router without any client components. This is really cool, and you start seeing. I need to get the server component stuff working so I can actually demo all the pieces. But right now, this is just about. Right now, this is just about like. Once I understood what the solution looked like, I could finally. Everyone's like, "Why is Solid Router not 1.0?" It's because I couldn't definitively say what the solution looked like. I wouldn't have come to this a year ago. Now I'm confident. I know exactly what a 1.0 router should look like. And the beautiful thing, as I said, is it's not any bigger on byte size, right? We have types, type parameters. We have this hooks. Okay, right? So all our APIs now accept these paths things. Use navigate, so you can navigate, replace, use params, again, path, set search, search page +1. There's some fanciness about path about end resolvers, but essentially the path API works in all the APIs. You can always still make your custom thing. There's use link state, which is lets you like check if the link is active or whatever. I might review the thing, but there is basically a like you can make capital anchor again if you really want. Actions and forms. Router action is action with a URL. Solid's core action primitive plus URL addressability, submission tracking, response handling. Data helpers come from router. Response helpers come from SolidJS web. Yeah. So you know how we had like return redirect, return JSON, return reload in Solid Start, and they came from Solid Router. Now those are in SolidJS web. They're part of the core server function thing, but we just expanded it so those URLs also accept paths. So redirect in a server function can use the path API as well. So again, you're only in your server function, you're only going to be using like everything's typed everywhere. So now you can only redirect from your server functions to path URLs as well. I mean, not only you can always still use the strings. Like the strings work. It's just if you want the TypeScript, you use these paths, and they work automatically with the server functions. Submitting gets ARIA busy automatically. The same CS story as links. Forms work without JavaScript. Real post, redirect. Yeah, so progressive enhancement, all those things work. So there's two like no JavaScript routes. There's the progressive enhancement where there's like literally no JavaScript on the page that's non-delegated and it does the full page request, which is the thing, the classic, like JavaScript failed or there's no JavaScript. And then there's like the server component delegated version, which still goes through the client logic and still applies this like ARIA busy and stuff. It's not the size of the bundle, it's how you use it. Thank you for that one. To be fair, Felt was a bit of an influence for this too, because they have lowercase anchors. They didn't have the same server component consideration, but once I saw when I saw Svelte with lowercase anchors, I mean, we already kind of supported them because like our earlier server component thing, but I just became so envious. I'm like, man, I hate capital A. Forms and anchors, like the navigation primitives, are special and they need to be handled core. I think metadata tags are also going to be like that. You know how Solid 2.0 doesn't have a meta plan yet, but I think eventually that class of stuff gets handled by our JSX compiler natively and is not in the land of third-party libraries. And essentially, it's one of those things you just install the V plugin and the freaking title tag works the way you want the title tag to work, right? Not a capital title, it's just lowercase title. Anchor and form are in this category. Oh yeah, I already put it yesterday after the router and saw the pricing done. Don't judge me, I already have apps. That's cool. I'm glad this stuff is working. There's still lots of bugs, but yeah, the preloading, yeah, like this. I think it's I like, this is the whole Voltron moment or Thanos moment. I like all the pieces are coming together with this release. We're missing a couple of the like new APIs and stuff, but we're at such a good base location that like we have everything we need. All right, hash memory history router. It's not, so it can be arbitrary URLs anywhere, server middleware, blah, blah, blah. Okay, server handling wire for framework integrations. Solid router server has a couple handlers built in. So now this ships with the router. It has a flight data collector and a create Node.js thing. So this is so any like handle server Vite plugin goes, hey, I want to be able to handle progressive enhancement. That logic doesn't live in Solid Start. The router, Solid Router happens to handle it. So if you choose to use Solid Router in your project, you can create a Node.js handler, and this is the single flight handler. So you again can just create the data collector and the handler and plug that into your create server config essentially in Vite, and then now you have single flight mutation and progressive enhancement. Like the cookies, like doing the submission cookies, like the remix trick, where you submit the form and then you see the errors in the cookies. That code lives in Solid Router, not Solid Start. Now in the create Node.js handler. So again, you just opt into that, and now your server will have the whole like error cookie submission stuff. Okay, what's gone from version 0x, so the current router? Capital anchor, active class, inactive class, used link state for custom components. JSX route is gone. Router, hash router, all those, they turn into the one created router call with options. Root preload, and preload, they all move into the factory. Navigate component, no, who cares? Use route preload. Okay, this is not true. The use route preload and use current matches didn't get cut. Yeah, this is an old version of this document. Redirect, reload, and respond re-export solid web. Yeah, I renamed JSON to respond. So redirect is kind of obvious. It's when you do a redirect from a server function or whatever. Reload is just flickering this current page. You can pass some like invalidation keys to it. And then respond is the old JSON, because we do not just JSON. So I renamed it. So it does do like a JSON as a fallback for like Node.js cases, but it can handle rich Laravel value. So that's like basically you can always just return the data from a server function, but if you need to like set headers and stuff, this is how you do it. Well, we get things like navigation index. I know you can use current matches is actually how you create breadcrumbs. I'm not giving you a breadcrumbs component. You can do it however you want to, but use current matches gives you the information you need to get breadcrumbs. Okay, let me actually go over to the Solid Router repo, because I think I'm realizing this is out of date, right? Solid JS router. Again, we can go to the next branch. And yeah, we're on next 9. Yeah, okay, this is much better. I should have gone over this. The initial design document is almost useless to publish because this is just better. Because there's a whole bunch of new stuff that's in here. Yeah. When the tree is composed across file subtrees, wrap the extracted arrays and define routes, an identity function that preserves the literal types. This is a TypeScript trick. Don't ask me, TypeScript's annoying like this. But the reason you can do this is obviously route composition, but also there are some questions about like lazy routes because it's a static tree, and the problem with lazy routes is they're not discoverable either for data fetching, like for preload, and they're not discoverable via types. So the compromise we made is that we support lazy route sections. So like we can be like, look, everything behind admin, don't load the route definitions until someone actually successfully navigates into the admin section. So like we can kind of lazily load like obscure parts of the route definition if necessary. And that way, I think there's like some people care about that. It also, but we are smart enough that once we kind of like get into it, we will trigger the preloads and everything. It just, there's a bit of a waterfall, obviously. But the preload link triggering it would actually get you past that waterfall because it'd fire it earlier. I mean, we rewrote all solids tooling in Rust. The server functions compiler, the JSX compiler, the lazy hoisting, the HMR mechanism all got rewritten in Rust. Oh, yeah, we have use before leave. We have a use before leave hook, and we keep track of depth. So we know when you know when people would back out of your app. Yeah, we have that. Where was I? Routed per instance. Links are plain anchors. Mental instance versus hooks. Yeah, this is something that I had to kind of get into here. API splits for two surfaces. The line between like when do you import or when do you use hooks, right? Instance is shared, one module level object serving every mount, every request, every test. It's deliberately non-stateful. On server, there are many current locations at once. Exactly, right? So if you anything you import from the like direct router import is not per instance based, right? So instance based, paths, how to spell URLs, match. How would a URL match? Routes, config that exists. Hooks, use location, use params, use navigate, use preload route, move war, uses routing, use route matches. Yeah, we renamed current matches to route matches. Use search params, live state. They compose as nouns and verbs. The instance supplies a typed URL. The hook acts on the current session. Navigate, use navigate. Navigate path. Params, use params. Yeah. Hooks are the default. Import the router only when you need typed URLs or matching outside of render. Components that read their session, blah, 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 never need the instance, which also means component files don't form import cycles with the router module that references them in its config. Tree is immutable. There is one router per app that makes paths and types in match, call, delegation, link state. Preloading all have single owner, compose large apps, define routes. Shouldn't load lazy subtrees. Dynamic routes, yeah. As long as the URL fits, blah, blah, blah. Notes on animation transitions. Routes that share the same path are treated as the same route. To force a re-render, you have to key them. Yeah, this is an old trick. Match filters. This is how you set rules for the routes. Optional parameters. Wildcards. Multiple paths. Nested routing. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is all lazy route subtree. Sorry, this is what I was looking for. The children also accepts a thunk. So a whole section of route table, not just as quote stale the initial bundle. Yeah, this is what I wanted to show. So like, where is it? Children import admin routes. See? The import only fires when something needs a subtree, hovering a link into it, navigating to it, or the server matches a URL beneath it. Until the tree carries a placeholder that knows every URL under the admin belongs to the subtree without knowing its contents. Types never run the thunk. Inference flows through the import's promise type. So still type checks. Yeah. So this allows you to like still type check through lazy loaded route sections. Navigation table, preloading, triggers it, server, render stream. Resolution is cache per thunk, append only. The tree never changes shape after a subtree lands. It just gets more specific. Keep thunks deterministic rather than switching tables or runtime state. Type paths, we talked about. Link, these are the special attributes. Although like technically target isn't special. This is for like when people don't want delegation on by default. So they don't like this is a cool, there is a mode in Solid Router where you're saying like I don't want to delegate, so I want to say which links I want the router to intercept, and all the other links I'll handle it yourself. We talked about this. Aria active page pending, use link state, preload functions. These haven't changed at all. Talking about the arguments to preload functions, data APIs, query still the same. Action still the same. Showing form actions, button action there. Busy, nothing too crazy there for optimistic. Oh yeah, there's a difference. We now have optimistic hooks. So what you can do is you can add like on submit to your actions, and you can do this. It returns the actions like or the new action, whatever. So you can do this globally, but you can also do it in the components, which owns its own optimistic state. So like multiple, you can have the same action fire and multiple components be listening to that action, which is declared globally. This has been a kind of common pattern in Solid where we can like define actions like outside of the component tree and then have different components subscribe to them. So this way on submit lets you basically set some optimistic state. So like, it gets the items it gets the to-do that's going to be added and adds it to the list. So this way, the reason this is important is this action itself is progressive enhanceable. It's like if this was a server function, it would still work. The key to this is on submit and like on complete hooks only fire on the client. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave that up. Only fire on the client, which means that like if the whole body of the action has to be a server function in order for progressive enhancement to work, we can't put the optimistic hooks inside the action the same way we do in a normal client-side action. So that's why there's specific hooks for code that basically only runs on the client. On submit registers a listener preferred pattern. Oh yeah, on settled. It's on submit and on settled. Server completion. With method for binding, we still have that. Lets you like instead of using hidden fields, just bind data to your action function, use action, again for calling it directly without using a form. Use submissions. We got rid of use submission because it's a little bit different than it was. We don't carry pending state now in this. You use optimistic the way I showed if you want like pending state. Use submission is literally just showing like what is going through the response. So we're basically leveraging the core Solid 2.0 primitives here, and use submission is literally just like looking at like you can filter it still, just looking at like what previous submissions have done. So like showing errors and stuff is where you use submission. Type search parameters, router config, we talked about single flight. None of this has actually changed. Use parameters, use new, okay, use location, use search parameters. Uses routing, use match, use route matches, use preload route, use link route, use before leave. This is the like navigation hook. Other environments without proxies. This is important for people with the universal renderer. We're still keeping support for this. Server integration, yeah, create single flight mutation hooks. Both hubs previously lived in Solid Start. The router now owns them. Migration guide. Showing deprecating create async for create memo. Query submissions on submit. Yeah, spas and deployed environments. Rewrite. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on all that, but that is the proposal for Solid Router 1.0. It's currently out on the Solid 2.0 branch. So yeah, I mean, all it's missing is the file system, arguably. And there's actually a discussion proposal about that actually in progress right now. Move parts of file system around for start to router. Burke had a pretty good proposal. I kind of fired back saying like, hey, let's make something generic. It doesn't even need to be SolidJS. We could just make like a file routes, like our router agnostic plugin is like based on Vinci, which is actually framework agnostic. So we could have like a framework agnostic file system router V plugin that has, it would have to generate like a certain convention. And I think the component convention that we have on the data is the same one that I think even Vue uses. So, I mean, there's probably specific data pieces we're missing. Maybe we had a convention in ours, like how to pass metadata through like this file system routing config. But basically you take that Solid starts file system routing and then have a special Vite plugin extension on it. And then essentially there'd be a small integration layer in Solid's router, like /fs or something. That's the idea. It looks like, oh, Brenly already took a stab at it. But essentially, it really does come down to all the pieces kind of just fitting really naturally. There is an interesting argument that the Remix guys had that like it's beneficial for AI if all the packages come out of the same like mono repo or whatever. So it is an interesting question of whether we should be like, or out of the same package. That's why they ship the stuff the way they do. I never really thought about that because I never want the closed garden in it. Solid router is just one possible router. There is a few protocol stuff that we implement from Solid Core, but any router could do this, and we're going to test that with TanStack router. It should be able to use all the same mechanisms that I put in here. And if TanStack start can accept our server functions and server components as part of the protocol as well, then they can add their validation wrappers and compiled like create server function stuff on top of it, then we should be able to actually have a fairly smooth story here. But the core thing for me is, and this is the thing you start asking, you're like, it's not necessarily that you don't need TanStack start, or like in Solid Start's case, yes, Solid Start pretty much disintegrates into the ether. It's more of a question of like, now it's a choice. It's not, like we don't have to take like the React stance of like everyone needs a meta framework, like if you're using React, you should be using Next.js. It goes back to being a choice here, because all the pieces you have, and there's like 4 of them, really. Like assuming you're smart and you're using Beat, like you have one bundler, it's just a matter of being like, okay, where am I deploying to? I'm going to use Solid, hopefully, and then what router I'm going to use. That kind of, and then obviously from there you can build out all the other stuff that goes on top of it. But at the core, that's all Solid Start is. Solid Start collapses into templates. It's beautiful. In a sense, what I just described is TanStack Start gets to still exist because it's just a wrapper over Solid Start. Do you know what I mean? Like there is no Solid Start. It's just a wrapper over Solid. Like that's kind of the mentality here. In a sense, like Solid Start didn't die. It just got absorbed into the right layers. And then every solid meta framework, whether they need to exist or not, I guess I'll leave that up to you guys, or AI's decision, is actually just a wrapper over that same fundamental. But there's nothing that you can't just do wiring yourself up in a Beat plugin or have a simple like Beat template. That's where we're at. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. You know what? Yeah, let's do it. I It's just because Solid Start's not aligned on it either. And like this is finally the 1.0 version. But yeah, I just don't want people to think that everything that comes out, like we like Beat plugin Solid is also going to be 3.0. Like most of our ecosystem libraries aren't a bunch of them got ahead of us, and part of it because of Solid Start. So there's a bunch of libraries that weren't ready yet that are a 0x that are finally getting to 1.0 for the first time essentially with this move, and then there's a bunch of libraries that were already actually on 2.0 and moving to 3 with this move. So aligning them seems nice, but it's not something we can do across the ecosystem. So I don't know if I want to encourage it. Yes, I agree. The piece of code that's good. Yeah. See, docs need work because if you let me or I guess, write the docs, you end up with that README. Um, do you know what I mean? Like the README was the old docs are actually laid up almost the same as this, and the README is kind of like an extension of that. I mean, docs are hard. There's only one solution. Release Solid 2 is Solid 3, yeah, and then we can force everything up to 3 because I don't think many things are past 2. Beat plugins at 2. Solid starts at 2. I don't know if you guys saw news. Solid Start 2.0, as in for Solid 1.0, like the updated, devincified, modern Solid Start. Maybe possibly even the last version of Solid Start. We'll see. Is actually in RC. So we're getting very close to releasing it. People have been using it for months in alpha, like open code and like stuff, but the actual like what Solid Start should have always been. Again, this has been the struggle with Solid Start. Its whole life has been like an acknowledgement of the shortcomings of the tooling around it. Like every piece of it, every piece had like we basically had to invent the environment API before Vite did in order to get to where we we needed to go, and it was just paddling uphill for something that like eventually should just be the thing, you know, like didn't need to exist. Yeah, in the days of Vite, yeah, like two very quick successive up releases. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think he skipped any numbers, but I'm pretty sure I remember him like doing like two releases almost back to back. Sometimes I start, yeah, or absorbing it, but that's not the near term. Well, I guess so. I mean, it was always part of the plan. I just we have to. We'll see if the Solid 2.0 gets it turned. See, here's the problem. Do we release Solid 2.0 without Solid Start ready? Like without absorbing all these things in, like file system routing, all that? Like, do we do it without like this? All the stuff we're talking about right now could delay Solid 2.0 release, right? We're very ready to go RC on the core. The router is pretty much ready to go. You know, the other stuff like server components, I'm not worried about their experimental features. They're marked experimental. They're not actually officially part of the 2.0 release. Server functions are, but not server components. So I'm not worried about that. It's like file system routing. Do we make that move right now during the RC period so that when 2.0 comes out officially? Maybe. Now that AI is here, maybe I shouldn't be worried. I talked to Tanner yesterday and he was just like, man, just fucking, just like, he didn't say, he doesn't talk like that, but he was just like, Ryan, you err on the side of perfection. Just release it. That's what he actually said. Um, you know, he, he's right. I spend too much time in beta phases. I spend a lot of time. Solid 1 came out like 2 years after it's supposed to. And the reason Solid 1 took so long is I wanted to have a definitive answer for server rendering. I could have released Solid 1.0 in 2019. Ironically, it would have come out before Svelte 3. I was ready. I'd made my real world app demo in February, and I mean, it was we were good to go. It was Solid 1.0, and to be fair, funnily enough, it would have been just as fine. Honestly, the server rendering stuff wasn't really breaking; it was additive, and we didn't actually change any of the APIs between pretty much 2019 till now. So, yeah, I mean, we've been stable from an API standpoint now for, I guess, 7 years. But I needed to be sure that server rendering wasn't going to change the equation. And then similarly, I think a lot of, you know, this speculations have been around async and server components, but now I have an answer. Semver was a mistake, maybe, yeah. AI is making the migration easy too. Solid 1 to Solid 2 is like the most trivial migration ever from an AI standpoint. And when you consider that people are migrating from React to Solid or whatnot, then like, yeah, the problem is I don't know if I can depend on AI for everything for people. Some people still want code mods. See, we're in a weird thing where people like code mods are cheaper from a processing standpoint, but like if we don't offer migration script code mods in this day and age, we're actually okay. And again, another thing, if we have to stop and worry about code mods, that's going to push the release back a couple more months, you know, like, do you mean the APIs are solved now? I kind of want to write an article about it. In a sense, Solid has been at the very edge of innovation and has been the most stable JavaScript framework for 7 years, which is so funny to think about. and it depends on how you measure stability, but like because React has been backwards compatible, but the thing is, actual backwards compatible and breakingness is not a good indicator of stability when best practice patterns change. What we've kind of done with this 2.0 release is not change the patterns all that much. Like the conceptual model for Solid 1 and Solid 2 is actually almost unchanged. Like there's the async bit, but like for the most part, signals, fine grained rendering, all like the mechanisms, the way you architecture that, where the state goes, where like we haven't changed anything. We haven't been like, haha, server should be the root of your app. We haven't done anything like that. And then at the same time, we potentially actually are releasing all of the like other features kind of together at the same time. So this is a single churn point. So from a standpoint, like there's no view 2 to view 3 here. There's no even Svelte 4 to 5 or Svelte 2 to 3. Like all during the same time period. Every other framework's either gone through one or two major API level changes or conceptual changes. I think React's moving to hooks is just on the outlier of that. It came out in 2019, so you could argue like that, like the React move to hooks was in 2019 for a lot of people. So like if you count that in there, then yeah, Solid has been the most stable JS framework in the last 7 years. I think without the React hooks move, it's kind of like a little bit arguably the other way. But actually, RSCs is fair. Next.js meta framework, like everything needs to be meta framework off create React app. Those are all major movements have actually fundamentally changed the way you view and approach the framework enough that I consider them all actually stability changes. I did a stream about my AI workflow and about the impact of AI like a few months ago. It's changed since then, but honestly, I talked about it. It's not that interesting. It's really it's really just about having multiple threads going at the same time, and basically having a lot of conversations with Fable. And again, I know people say I understand. I'm working with Fable more and more, and I understand why some people might prefer GPT. I conceptually get it now. I didn't originally because like GPT just felt like Fable feels really dumb in a certain way where you're like, I'm just trying to put this release out, Fable. Just do it, and then it's like, how did you screw that up? You didn't package the dependencies right. Like what are you doing, Fable? But then on the other hand, when you talk to GPT and you're like, is there something, I feel like there's a gap in the hydration algorithm. Like this can break. Nope. I checked it myself. It is perfect. It is infallible. And you're like, no, but like, I think there's a timing issue. Let me check it. Nope. Don't worry. It's perfect. And you're like, whereas Fable, the same kind of task, before you even ask it, you're like, okay, it's like, I'm done. But there might be an issue here. We should check this here later. And you're like, I can't explain it. Fable can be so stupid for doing practical stuff sometimes, where you're just like, how is it not obvious to you need to do this? But on the other hand, it doesn't typically miss anything from like an architectural standpoint, which is funny because that means Fable's a lot like me, like personality wise. So sometimes you need the opposite thing. You need the person to say, yeah, go ship it, like GPT. But other times I need just more me. And that's why I like Fable. Like it's not even close. I appreciate, I can understand now with the teams that are like, oh, GPT 5.6 and all this stuff, but it's like GPT is almost useless to me. Like Fable is like so much better. Like it's not even like, it's so funny. I saw some tweets on Twitter where people like, if you think Fable's great, you're lying to yourself, blah, 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 all this stuff. And you're a liar or you don't know how to program. And I'm just like, I saw that tweet and I might have even bookmarked it. It was so funny. But like, yeah, I mean, Fable game changer for me. Like I talked about like how AI has made Solid 2.0 and Cursor and a big thing. And this is why I was trying to get those Anthropic things. I was okay to let Anthropic slide and like use up my Cursor stuff and then go on paternity leave, not lose my 6 months because I was like going to be away for, a month or two. So I waited, and then they went away anyways. But I would kill for Anthropic uh, tokens at this point, because honestly, like moving from like Opus 4.8 or from like GPT 5.5 to Fable felt like moving. I think I mentioned this before. Moving from like GPT 5.0 to Opus 4.5, like it felt bigger than that. Like I've never experienced such an improvement in AI in such a short period of time for what I'm doing. Anyways, I could get AI to make the code mods. Yeah. I still have to think if I want to like manage them, be responsible for them. But yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. I think they'll hold up. Yeah, it's a little. There's less prior art this time. Like when I did Signals, like I'd been using Signals for like 6 years in this capacity through Knockout, or longer, like for 7 or 8 years. So when I created Solid originally, like in 2016, I had like no doubts that this was the way to go, and it continued. Async is an area that I've had preliminary designs and playing around with really since 2022 ish, and then put on hold for working on Solid Star, and then come back to. I've had 4 years or so to kind of percolate with these APIs, and they have shifted a lot, like the little details, but the basic construct, I'm pretty confident in. Was install into the beginning of remote functions. Yeah. I always like seeing features inspired by Solid show up in Svelte, and I know they like seeing it the other way. Our current async solution definitely was inspired by Svelte. Why did Moon Divided, that kind of bug does it print? I never had issues with instance of and just like commanding flash. I know. I have a whole article about this. Um, it's literally just impossible to keep the old thing and be correct. I have a whole article on this. Let's see if I can find it. Two React design choices elders don't like but can't avoid. We actually went on stream and talked about this for like a couple hours, and people, like, I think I convinced everyone on that stream. I don't remember exactly what one of my async streams, because I did a lot of them, but we got to one where like it was literally kind of resolved that this was the only really way to go. But I'll drop this in the chat, even though it's like a little bit late, because I'm still 5 minutes behind chat. Opus 5 is out. Okay. I think it's about the kind of, if you work on large applications and you want to do faster, GPT wins without a reasonable doubt. Yeah, I think so. I can, especially like when I'm trying to do a release Fable, and I'm like waiting like 15 minutes for it to like make sure everything's okay. I get that, and I'm not even talking about like on max or high. Like Fable, it's just slow as molasses. But like I will wait when when I want to trust. I don't trust GPT at all. I trust GPT the way I trust a salesman. Not even snake salesman, like just anyone on the sale. You talk to somebody in sales, they're not bad people, but you kind of gotta be like, "Okay, I might have to check that later." You know what I mean? The tasteful GPT is disciplined and follows user instructions to a T. I mean, then they're an effective salesperson for me. All right, okay, I've caught up with chat. So that was a quick jump. It seems like I was going off, and there's a bunch of chat through 110, and then it just like dropped off. I didn't expect to catch up to chat so quick. Okay. I literally, this is what we've been talking about the whole stream. Um, yeah, I think if you just go back, um, yeah, it would take me a while to explain it again, and basically that's what this whole stream has, like, after we got past the Rust compiler, been about. Yeah, essentially, like, try the short version of it, but meta frameworks are mostly opinions, and if we collapse the key mechanical stuff into the core framework, you don't like need the other stuff. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at this week in JavaScript. I think I have one more proposal I could pull up on the HackMD, but it's rough, and I don't I don't know if I like it. The guys on the next channel and Solid just picked it apart to crap. It's basically a view transition API, very similar to React's. Decided React again was completely right on most things. So challenges when having to defend this against the people in the Discord next channel is sometimes challenging because they exist to poke holes in things, which is useful. But I don't feel confident enough in this design to actually give a defense. That's kind of like our process right now. I iterate with AI until I'm happy with the proposal, and then I have to do like a adversarial defense in the Discord channel of anything I propose. That's been the whole 2.0 process essentially, where I have a group of very capable people trying to poke huge holes in what I've been working on. Yeah, I guess I just don't have as much to say, even though I've been doing so much work. There you go. Yeah, Gabriel is one of the people who's been very essential in making sure. Like, I don't know how to thank people. I will try to do as much as I can in the release notes and stuff. But Solid 2.0 would not be what it is if it were not for having this active participation of people just poking holes and thinking through designs and stuff. It's kind of interesting because the way we reward or structure things doesn't really fit that. Like a lot of the core team members of Solid or the team members are like developers that you would have on your team who are building out specific features or researching specific areas. They have specialization. Having people, they're not necessarily like, sometimes they'll come in and out of the 2.0 conversation, but like their primary goal isn't necessarily working through what 2.0 should be. And I don't really have a category for the people that the kind of, and it is a group of people who regularly, like Brenly as well, and a few who regularly work and contribute to the 2.0 design. And yeah, the Discord chats are so best for brainstorming sessions. The Discord is definitely where to interact on this stuff. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think view transitions are just freaking hard, and I don't feel like talking about them now. I think the only other thing worth talking about, you know what? Yeah, there's one more thing I want to do before we go to this week in JavaScript, and that is talk about the effects API. And I think the way to do that, hopefully it works right now. I've been having some mixed results. It's the newest API and probably the last API on the 2.0 thing. I jumped this. So they really like the API as she's having a built-in style transition. So yeah, well, Svelte animations section is very strong, and it's a place that has a lot of complexity, and it's a place that I keep on pushing back. View transitions seems like a natural place to hook, but it doesn't tell the whole story, and it's limited. And people who specialize in the area understand the limitations. I don't. So it's very hard for me to kind of talk on that angle. Like I think our core mechanics in Solid 2 are unparalleled, but I don't know enough about like CSS animations and stuff to actually say that I feel confident on like what the best solution is there. Or can we just default to view transitions for the basic framework level stuff and let like people use, whatever GSAP or whatever the hell they want to do for other animation things? I don't know. What do I want to say here? Okay, yeah. So what I want is I want to take one of my to-do examples and I want to fork it. We probably don't need this silly divide example from the previous stream anymore. Yeah, I'm gonna delete that one. Optimistic UI, optimistic data. Probably optimistic UI. I think this is the one I'm gonna take. And while we're here, we might as well update the depths just because we can. We'll go to beta 25. See, this one's still on Babel because it doesn't use Vite. Hopefully I didn't just break the world. Refresh the page. There it is. Okay, cool. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fork this. Okay. And this is not the ideal starting place, but the reason I wanted to do this one is this is the closest to vanilla while not being vanilla, and I wanted to keep the wiring for the actual like stuff. Because if you've seen this to-do example, it's more like the React pattern. We like using optimistic stores and optimistic data primarily. It's much cleaner for like doing optimistic updates, and it's super powerful. This is like the per optimistic thing. But here's the thing. What if you don't want optimistic updates? Like you don't want to like predict stuff. You don't want to lie. And let's see if we can build this. The idea here is we're going to make a usable UI without optimistic updates that still give us nice affordances. So, because I've obviously our ultimate optimistic updates make wonderful demos. Like you make your Notion boards and all this and drag and drop and all the remix stuff. And we have the best optimistic solution, not even close. Just in terms of terseness, capability, guarantees, like it's very, 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 very powerful. But I don't think everyone needs to use it. So in this case, when I click this, there's no affordances here. It's so optimistic. It just acts as if it's sync. It just everything works. Nothing ever fails. I have one with failures and all this other kind of thing. But the reason this works, if I got rid of the optimistic state, so we're gonna remove. I think there's only 2 hooks added. So we get rid of added, and we get rid of there, and we get rid of completed and is removing. I'll leave is I'll get rid of is removing too. I'm just going to delete all the optimistic hooks here. I can't just what is completed. I think I went too aggressively. I can't get rid of props to do completed. I still need a like is completed conceptually. It's derived. See, optimistic shadowing is so super powerful. So I props to do completed is what I need. So is removing is gone. So we're back on the naked async version. This is what you'd get if you had no. There we go. You have async workflow, but you didn't bother using any optimistic state anywhere, right? So this is basically as it is it looks like the synchronous to do MVC app. There's actually you wouldn't know there's anything async here because there's nothing async there's this loading thing here, I guess, but like there's nothing async or affordance based at all anywhere in the UI. And it just so happens that in create to-dos over here, we have some actions that add to-dos and then refresh to-dos, remove to-dos and refresh to-dos, set, completed. There's just a few actions here that we expose. And the fact that when we actually get the to-dos, this .get to-dos is actually an async call through a projection. But there's no affordances here. This is just a bunch of actions, with refresh, and there's no optimism. In fact, In this scenario, you could even argue you don't even need actions because there's no visible thing. Because what happens here is when I click this, all right, I have to refresh through this. When I click this, the checkbox updates up way because we're not controlled. But if you notice this, it waits till it saves to actually apply the change, right? If I delete this, it's going to be there and then it's going to go away. When I add stuff, you're not going to see them until they save. This is a typical async without affordance thing, right? We didn't add any optimistic state. Things update once they're complete, okay? And we need it without optimistic updates. And I think you could do it, but I'm not going to worry about error affordances here. I want to look at a different type of affordance, right? Pending affordances. And the thing is, adding, I could have left as optimistic because there's not much you can do with adding, right? Like I guess what we could do is we could add like a underneath the table here, we could add like a show. Or sorry, not there, not in here. We can go for UL section. We can just do like let's just do like a show when, why am I typing up there? It's funny, I have my keyboard down here and I'm like typing up on my, I don't know why I'm doing that. Show when, I'll worry about the condition in a second. And we're gonna say, yeah, I'm not actually, you know what? Screw adding. Adding is something we'll get to. Let's start with the simple case, the toggles case. What if I want to give an affordance to show that that work is being done, like when I click it, or even the deletion case. Both of these are places where I might want an affordance. Now, obviously optimistic is the obvious way, but we maybe we could do something like per the row. I'm just gonna add something. This is my favorite trick of all time. You guys always know that I do style, opacity, some kind of hook, right? So we can say, how if we did is pending what do we want to ask? Is pending props dot to do ID, let's say. And then we're going to do 0.5, otherwise 1. Okay. Sorry, and we got to update our import to add is pending. Because we talk about is pending a lot, but what does this do here? Now, in earlier versions of Solid 2.0, what would have happened is if we check this box, we'd see something kind of funny. And I'll explain it because we don't have earlier versions of Solid 2.0 in front of us right here. But what would happen is nothing would change like we saw while it was adding the to-do. And then when we called refresh, it would light up the whole thing. All the rows would go updating. Like they'd use our pending indicator because refresh touches all the rows. And then like this is why we're using optimistic state essentially, because technically the whole list is pending. But there's two problems with this. We don't know until we hit the refresh what gets updated. There's no graph connectivity. We like set optimistic gives us a hint of what we think will happen. But what if we don't have the value? What if we don't want the optimistic update? We don't know what it's going to be. Then what do we do, right? We have our UI that says like, hey, very clearly, when I'm pending, change my opacity, but this it does, the whole first half of the save doesn't, it doesn't know until it actually calls refresh. And then at the point it calls refresh, it actually lights up everything because every row depends on the same to-dos. It's not very helpful, right? So is there an affordance for this? And it took us a while to actually kind of come up with what we wanted to do here. And this is where effects came in. And I've never used effects. We're going to learn how it works right now, which is funny for someone who designed it. But I think there might be some edge cases. And this is exactly why I want to do this right now. What if you could say something like, it's funny because I deleted the lookup code that I actually want for this. What if you could say, first of all, you could say, what if you said effects to-dos? This is a way that you can tell it before it gets to the refresh what it needs to do. When I said previous versions, we made a change when we add the effects APIs that refresh does not automatically trigger pending on everything. Refresh assumes things are unchanged and you have to prove otherwise. I know that's an interesting semantic shift, but we're saying there's a difference between refreshing something and then versus triggering it reactively. When you trigger something reactively, you're like changing an ID or something you're expecting to change, whereas a refresh is saying like it's not going to change unless I verify that it changes. That's why it doesn't prematurely impact pending anyways. But counterly, we need a way of saying this. So what this does for us essentially is it tells us that we want the pending state, like this action is affects to-dos, ahead of the yield. So it solves two of our problems. It lights up the stuff that refresh would yield. And it also tells us before, while we're doing the saving, that we actually, to-dos is probably going to be pending. It's a speculative pending without providing a value. Now, does this work? I don't know. We're going to find out. Yes. Do you see that? When I do this, every row lit up. See, it grayed out slightly. Maybe I need something more obvious. What should I use here? Can I change the color of the text? That'd be fun. Red. And there's a zero there still. And then, is it auto? How do I get it to pass through? Whatever, I don't care. Default. But we'll just make it black. I don't care. All right. There we go. Now you can very clearly see all the rows pending, and it happens right away. It doesn't wait for the save. Inherit, is that what it is? Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can never remember. It's been so long since I messed with CSS that I don't remember these things. Like I've forgotten and done it. So while the to-dos are pending, it lit up red, which is, it's already now, we've wired in stuff. Because as I said, there's no connectivity. It happens too late. But this is all fine, right? And it's especially fine for this one, right? Because when you're adding a to-do, we might want to indicate the whole list is adding. But I think we can do better than that. What if we did something like, I mean, we could have passed the to-do through, but what I'm going to do is to-dos dot find to-do, actually, sorry, t dot id equals id. Now the question, I'm not sure if this is going to actually work the way I want it to. I suspect it might not, but let's hope it does. What if we just actually, instead of saying that it affects the whole list, that it impacts the specific to-do that we actually want to update? If that works, yeah, we get granular pending affordances while the work is done. Yeah, so that actually worked. Sweet. So it's probably because I did to-do.id as my way, because the read has to read it. So there might be like some specific edge cases here I'm not seeing, but I'm just gonna inline it so it kind of, so you're like, this is a little bit different than optimistic state, but the reason that I wanted to highlight this is this answers the composition question we asked on my last stream. Because if someone's building an API without knowing about the process, just knowing about the data, they're going to have a lot of these as pendings, like a select list. You know, they're going to design their thing going like, I need to be, I wonder if this works if I get rid of ID. I don't think it does because it's not reading any property off the to-do. Let's double check that. No, it doesn't. Yeah, I need to actually read a property off it, and the ID keys it. So yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is you're gonna see a lot, and I actually have to think about. We probably have a better solution because there's probably a way of making the to-do access key the pending. Like props.todo is going to, yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that. You guys probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I'll worry about that later. But essentially, where was I going? Yeah, we're gonna have these affordances kind of generically watered through our thing, even without the worry of optimism. And what this API gives us the ability to do is kind of predict based on your action what gets impacted. So like, I know this is not the right affordance, but we could, for this one, for add for some reason, light up the whole page because we want to. We could say like, sorry, there's no HMR in this one, so I have to light it up. So these ones per row, these ones, this one affects everything. Did that not work? Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, everything per row. Yeah. So it's an interesting API. I think this completes the picture essentially, where because there's no connection between the work you're going to do before and after, this lets you kind of close the gap where you can say predictively, without optimism necessarily, you can tell the reactive graph what might be stale, what could be pending, kind of ahead of time, and then you can get the right affordances for is pending in a predictive way. The other use case for this would be coming in for things that aren't actually like you're not going to get the pending state very easily off the async. Like let's say you're doing like a chat app or something on WebSockets. This gives you a way to speculate into the pending state essentially on your events and kind of still tie into the life cycle. There is a lot of overlap between optimistic and effects, and I've been trying to think of how to best teach that. I actually want to see if I'm going to pull up Discord, not on this screen, hopefully on a different screen, and I'll pull out an excerpt of one of let me see. From I was talking through the docs team trying to figure out how to explain all these different primitives, and AI generated some like explainer. So let me see if I can post that onto here. Just so that just drop this in here. Each primitive closes a real hole. Loading means no settled answer. Is pending, another answer is coming. Latest, inspect that answer. Effects, identify an unknown future change. Optimistic state, provide a predicted change. Action, coordinate the process. Refresh, reconcile durable truth. Common path, loading is pending, actions, optimism. completeness map, latest effects, refresh semantics combinations. So basically what they're saying is, this is like trying to figure out how to teach people the concept. You start with loading in as pending, and then actions, and then optimism, and then stuff like latest and effects and refresh are kind of like progressively added on for complexity. But this is the whole map essentially. There are these new concepts that need to be understood in model async. But yeah, I think this helps me a bit, at least. Again, loading, no answer yet. So it's like initial is pending, another answer coming, spec that answer. So latest and is pending are kind of related to each other. Effects, identify an unknown future change, provide a predicted change. So this is like the difference between optimism and effects. One is to kind of like predict something will change, but you don't necessarily know. And the other one is to give a prediction. The action refresh stuff is kind of like beside the point. So, but I think this is the key difference. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense to people. Sorry. Not where I want to be. Just gonna leave it here for a second. Switch back to chat. When SolidJS has no build, I mean, we have a no build option. We've always had a no build option. You can use tag template literals with Solid. Even today, we shipped 1.0 with no build. We don't do a good job of marketing ourselves, do we? Oh well. Refresh can after the fact. It's already too late. Do you know what I mean? Like, by the time refresh resolves, it's over. Right? You need something predictive. Like refresh is the very end. You go, I update this, and then I go fetch the new data. You don't know. You know what you're fetching when you hit refresh, but before you hit refresh, you don't know even what you're refreshing. Like from the perspective of like, let me look at this deck list. From the perspective of like remove to do action. Pretend this effects isn't here. You go here, and this is like an await. So you go to remove the to do. This whole time period while it's removing the to do in the database, like going to the server, this has no idea what's the downstream impact of that's going to be. And then when refresh hits, it's like, okay, I actually am going to update to do. So I know this whole list of to-dos is going to be update, but it doesn't know what's actually changed. And then at the end, we diff and we only update the things that changed, or we have our fine-grained updates and pinpoint updates. We have all the machinery, but it's too late. You do not know, like, you don't know until the end. What's the main difference? Well, effects is saying, hey, speculate that this is pending. It's a way of turning on is pending. It's basically like what we're saying here. We're telling this thing, we're like, hey, when, like, at this point, tell props to do here, this specific to do, tell it that, like, we look for the props with that ID, tell it that it's pending. Effects is a way of like telling it. Sorry, where's my untitled one here? Effects, identify an unknown future change. So it's basically saying, like, I don't know what you're going to change to, but you're probably stale. I'm going to trigger it. And this comes into our last week conversation where there's a difference between process and data. Optimistic is about process. It's saying, like, I am doing this action, saving. I am updating. I am mutating, adding. It's something you can tag onto it, but it doesn't impact the data. That's why, like, when you make an optimistic update, and I like the perfect affordance thing, I was adding like pending states as optimism. I was saying, like, hey, well, this is optimistic, pending equals true, or like it's basically stuff that I'm melting into it, which is perfectly fine because it was based on that specific process, and I set the convention. But is pending is a data question. It does not know about the process. We did not. You see, like, it might be helpful to see the example side by side. we did not pass optimistic state in here. There's no optimistic state or pass through. This is asking a question about its own props. It's asking about the data. If you remember the let me go back to the dashboard. If you remember the optimistic UI version of the demo, not there, app. We actually sorry, this is part of the action. This part added is the important part. We actually and then it shows the affordance is removing. Like, it's fine because we did this inside. We didn't actually thread it through. But this is, we created a construct ourselves that we, like, if this was in a separate component or it's generic component, we'd have to thread through. The idea of like is saving or something, like if there's a child component here, we'd have to pass it through separately. Like you'd have like, here's my data, is updating it to component props. Like it's a separate process chain, whereas is pending can be asked about the data anywhere. That's why we had to close a loop. There's two different things. There's a process question and there's a data question. So effects closes the is pending data loop. Because you want to predict something. Effects doesn't tell you what the next value is going to be. Effect allows a lower data layer to say that something is changing and then leave it for the application to decide to add an optimistic overlay. Yeah. React doesn't do this. React assumes everything is process-based. They have no data graph knowledge like this. This is something that is a solid original. No other framework has is pending. Okay. Okay, effects can't be a Lambda, and this is why I'm kind of working on it. There's actually a key API for effects. Let me see if I have it here, where you can actually set a second arguments. And this is why I was wondering about like if the read would get in the way in the for. But like you can say like you could say like oh yeah, actually we can do better. We can do better. Like, what does completed change? Yeah, actually, you know what? I said, let's add another affordance. Let's do something like this. Color is pending. What's it? Completed. Completed. Green. Otherwise, if it's pending at all, red, otherwise inherent. Beautiful. Okay. And then let's find our to-do, toggle to-do, and put completed as a property change. The reason we can't use Lambda here is because it would read everything along the path, and you don't necessarily want to read everything along the path because then it would over effects. Like if you went, if you did this find inside the Lambda, you'd be hitting all the nodes. You just want the leaf node or the last thing that you want to, like, that you want to be deep on what the effects triggered. If we did in a Lambda function, we'd have to trace along the whole path. That's why it's the wrong API. Like it would hit the whole thing. Now you could always hoist it and then put what you wanted specifically in the lambda, but then in the end you literally are just doing this. So to remove the confusion, I got rid of the lambda. So let's see if what I just did works. Do you understand what I'm doing? I'm saying that we're not even the whole record. We actually only care if we're changing the completed field. So if this works, it turns green. It's hard to see. The green gets shadowed by the gray, and it turns green. But if we delete it, it's going to turn. Oh, it turned red. Oh. Oh, yeah. Do you know why it turned red? Because this is wider. I said the whole row was affected. So my logic here is backwards, right? It's more of like, Oh, how do I do this? This is like a, it's because when I delete it, it triggers everything. Um, I mean, I could scope the delete to just be the ID, which is a cheesy way of doing it too. Yeah, I think so, but this might not actually be correct. Let's think about this. Yeah, that worked. That's weird that the whole oh right, because now the now my effects everything isn't working anymore. Uh it's because my is pending is very specific. It's fine. But yeah, green on check, red on delete. My point is, I think there is some play here. We have to review a little bit on the API in terms of practice of what it looks like. As I said, I haven't played with this yet, but the core concept here is that you can get fairly granular on 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 the things that like are pending. You can say this field is pending, this row is pending, the whole list is pending. You have that flexibility in terms of expressing that and querying it. Yes, and yes, if the you can always represent a data affordance with a process affordance, except for the fact that it's not a data affordance. Like the thing with the data affordance is it's detached. You could 100% do that, and when we use optimistic stores, because of the convergence that the store is the data, that is the right pattern. Right? I showed it in my affordance demo. The problem is pending will not light up as true. So just because something's optimistic doesn't mean that we know for sure that it's going to change. It could go either way. You could say, like, we actually went through a whole debate here. We're like, oh, does optimistic mean that you've already claimed that it's changed, so it's no longer pending because you've made your prediction? Or is it suggesting that it definitely has changed? And we went back multiple times. And then the final, like, where we landed was like, actually, it's just a different process consideration. One is data channel and one is process channel. Yeah, but this is for data channel. If you want it to be a process, just use optimistic, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Like it affects instead of doing this, like saying like, hey, this is why this API is very kind of last stage of teaching is you could also just be like set optimistic adding to do. The only thing is adding to do, you're going to have to thread is adding through wherever you need to use it, right? Where this can actually ask the question of the data itself. It's a composition thing. Basically, this needs to be here for completion. Like, without this mechanism, we can't tell the full story. Optimism is one way to tell the full story along the process chains. Along the data chain, this is the way that you can tell the full story. So I chose completed ID because those are the things that change. Like deleting, you're removing the record. That's why I put the ID in here. Completed is you're literally toggling completed. So you're telling, hey, anyone listening, I'm saying that this completed is stale. It's a way of just like marking the data as potentially pending. But you could also not bother with data-based APIs here and use all my slick demos are fully optimistic. I'm just saying in reality, not everyone's using optimistic state for everything. Like optimistic makes really nice demos. A lot of times, a more sane default is just like saying, "Hey, is my thing pending?" Like I'm waiting on to dos, and then this gives you a way that says, "Oh, I'm updating to do." Guess what? I'm going to set it as pending while it's updating, so you know that the to dos are updating. It's a second separate channel that has its own value. There was a discussion that do we even need the data channel, but in a sense, the data channel is even more primary given our signals approach. The alternate argument here is that it's saying that this is the predicted future state, so it's not actually pending anymore. Because like if the future matches what you predicted, then no change has to happen. And having both lets you use both. There's no conflict here. These are completely separate channels. You can both have optimistic thing state and signify that it's pending. The problem is optimistic state's existence itself does not indicate like this was like the core of the tension here, because we were using optimistic for a while, and this is the time my last stream, as guards to say like, oh, if it's optimistic, then it's not pending. We actually were blocking the pending because the optimistic prediction existed. As I said, when you look at this, when it said optimistic state provide a predicted change. So yeah, I mean this is kind of like been the last really struggle point in terms of figuring out like the meaning of these things, because you could model most things as a process if you're willing to thread it through, but a lot of like compositional stuff doesn't want to thread it as a process. It wants to thread it as data, like perfect example of that is states. This dropdown here is disabled when its options are pending, essentially. Like when I switch here, I'm not talking about a process. I'm talking about, like, you'll find is pending a lot, not on actions. This is why effects is a little bit weird, because generally speaking, is pending is something that you're not using actually for actions. Actions are about optimism, they're about process. Whereas rendering here, you're like, look, I'm creating a generic component that does select. I want to show if my options aren't available, I want to show that I want to be disabled. I'm an input. If I can't do the thing, I want to be disabled based on my data. And you don't know what process is going to use you, so you're not going to thread some specific process. Now, you could essentially hoist it up, right? Because every select component is also going to have a disabled prop, which means that capital S select is also disabled. So then this is hoisted up all the way up, and then you can go like, oh, read the optimistic state to make that decision. So there is an argument. The biggest argument for the data mechanism is that it's encapsulated, in that you can actually ask the questions locally and get the answer. And it works very nicely for async loading. The question comes in is when you have actions, like I'm going to assume the is pending is already there, because people are going to already be using on generic components or stuff, like they're going to already be using data pending affordances for this, for like component libraries. So then the question is, and it works great on load, when I have actions, do I need to inform these components so that they work properly, that their data is pending or will be pending? That's the point of effects. I'm assuming that the is pending is already there. Essentially, like you've already built a system that works well on navigation. See, what's the difference between an action and navigation. Well, a navigation is generally just a set. It's when you trigger something synchronously and the graph might take a while to propagate, but it knows all the changes, right? There's no like this then that. Actions are when you end up with a sequence where you're like, I have to save this, then do this. The graph gets detached over the course of the actions, and you need the actions to tie the whole process back together again. So effects is more of like a mechanism to take the existing affordances that are built into navigations and be able to retrigger them. Optimistic state is great for managing processes, predictions, and whatnot, but it might not reflect on composed navigational read side of things. And this gives us a tool to close that loop. I understand that with the integrate loading states via is pending needed to provide instead of needing to provide a loading prop. Yeah, because a loading prop suggests semantics, right? Like, is it loading? Like, is it updating? I don't know. Like, is it saving? Depending on the app you're making, if you cannot predict the future, use effects. If you can predict the future, you use optimistic. One change would still happen. Confirm the prediction, resolving the is pending, because until the source of truth confirms, you have no idea if the right happened. Yeah. Yeah, the way that this ends is the same way optimism or is pending in general ends. When it resolves the data and knows whether yes or no something changed, at that point it is no longer pending. The effects no longer applies. Maybe I'm missing the question. One change would still happen. Confirm the prediction. Result is pending because you have no idea if the right to the DB happened. Oh yeah, you're okay. You're arguing about optimistic. Yeah, yeah. Don't get me wrong. We literally Brenly's article. He wrote a whole article about that mental model, and then uh, Gabriel literally wrote like a whole page on the complete opposite, and both approaches sounded perfectly reasonable, like and fully backed up with examples. We went very deep um, along both things. And the only conclusive answer we could get was to actually separate them because putting them together conflated something. And while it made it convenient, it always broke the opposite case. I wonder if I have them. I actually have demos that break when you do either assumption. I showed them last stream actually. If you really want to get into it, it was a bit of a snore towards the end, but I actually literally showed an example that broke both ways you assume. So essentially, like if you assume that optimistic is pending versus if you assume that it's not pending, we had an example that would break both ways, and this actually solved it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely this was actually the topic of the last stream. I was actually showing this as kind of a recap of us actually finding a way to actually solve it. Okay. I think this makes sense. There was yeah. Mark Pending was on my list of potential. I'd have to pull up the AI answer why the AI did not like Mark Pending for some reason. I can't trust AI. Obviously, we'll see in this week in JavaScript probably why I can't completely trust AI on its naming. So if you guys like Mark Pending better than FX, uh, um, probably worth saying it. Um, but yeah, let's switch this week in JavaScript. I think it's time. Give me a sec. Sorry, I'm just saving my bad effects demo. I close up some of this extra noise in the background. Hopefully everyone's still doing good. Oh, signed in as the wrong user. All right. Profile. I apologize too. If I feel like my last couple streams, maybe from a little baby lack of sleep, etc., I've been a little bit spacier than I usually am, a little bit slower to the uptake. Um, Longer streams are definitely taking a toll when operating into that consideration. All right. When was our last stream? July 10th. All right. That answers my question. And I didn't bookmark that much. It's funny. I literally have like one bookmark, but let's switch this week in JavaScript here. Why does it use a weird generated syntax? Someone in chat answer this. It's because we don't have async context, so there's no way to thread it without calling like function calls, which literally everyone forgets to do, which is so freaking brutal. After watching like the third or fourth React demo by React core team members that basically were doing live demos and forgot to call the function call again, I was like, generators may be ugly or clunky, but we're not playing this game. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. So let me switch to this week in JavaScript, I guess. All right. And let me get my screen share going again. I can just do this easier, yeah. Yeah, I don't have a ton here. Most of my stuff is actually main threaded. I think the only thing I bookmarked, I usually do my bookmarks at the end, but I'm just going to do one at the beginning because I just found this picture really cool. I don't know. I think most people know at this point that Fable and Mythos are the same thing. Um, so I can just close this tab and we can continue. Okay. I already shared this. We talked about this on the stream, but OXC and the performance was a big part of the Rust migration. So very stoked on being able to do that. This is something that would have taken. I just would have never done it. Let's face it. Like, was I going to learn Rust and do all this? No, not realistically. And now we see real wins here. So yeah, I'm just on the solid list right now because most of it's going to be mine. I'm just picking out the stuff that's not mine. Most elegant UI component design system using the most modern elegant tools. Solid, Panda, CSS, Arc, CSI. ASP design system. See, I don't know anything about this area, which is why I don't talk about it much. But whenever someone asks me about Shatsian, I just feel like there's people who literally build really cool design systems and stuff on top of Solid. Um, Using these like I don't think anyone's really wanting on the component and side. I hear it every stream, but it's just like yeah. Um anyway. I Looks cool. What else do we got here? Rust plus Tori Yeah, I love people, again, mobile apps. It's another one of those questions. It seems like sometimes I just go on here and repin people's projects, which show using Solid in places where people like assume you can't do Solid, like doing like native apps or mobile. Like obviously Rust and Solid are a good combination together. Um, I've been quite enjoying these articles. Brenly's also been writing a lot of articles, but Dennis has also been writing these articles trying to explain the concepts behind Solid 2.0's design to React developers, and I think he does a really good job. Um, it it shows a lot of the similarities and difference. In fact, my only nit, and I think it's in both articles, is he keeps on mentioning that React flushes sync, and React, as far as I know, flushes async. And they have a flush sync the same as Solid, so that part was always confusing to me because that whole like batched thing that we added that is awkward is actually literally a React thing. So the articles miss that because they're like, oh, you might not be used to it like this. This is exactly how React works. But other than that part, these articles are really good. It shows the one for one mapping, like of how you kind of map it in your head. And the truth of a lot of the solid primitives are actually a lot more powerful. So anyway, then there are React equivalents, but I definitely, you know what, let's post this in chat. What they're saying is they want a fancy looking marketing page for a UI library and 400,000 people using it. Otherwise, of course, it's terrible UI library and its buttons will fail their app. Okay. Yeah, this chat CN thing. Oh yeah. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, everything else is me. Well, this is going to be a short week in JavaScript. Okay, let's talk about the bike shedding thing. After going through the last iteration of changes and adding effects and going through all that stuff, we were kind of like, there people are still struggling with this whole is pending thing. That the fact that it can never be true during initial load, it either suspends or it could be false. Those are the two options. And originally, when I designed the system, it was false, and then I changed it to suspending, making it as pending and active read, just like latest. And I think that's consistent. Those two are parallel. But, he starts asking, are these the wrong name for the primitive? I knew if I put this, and part of me is I put its pending first, so obviously it wins, but I knew that people would choose its pending. No one likes it stale. Is in flight seems too weirdly specific. But I wanted to see if people would guess what AI would say, because I've been bugging AI about these APIs and designing them since January, really. And the funny thing is, AI, doesn't matter the model. Every single different model I've ever used thinks the primitive should be called as stale, and it's one of those funny things where people really don't like is stale. It leaves them with this discomfort, like it's like something rotten in their fridge. So we're gonna stay with this pending, even if it's stale is the more technically accurate name. It's just it's an interesting psychology, and it's a reason why I can ask the question in the first place. Like obviously, I'm not basing this decision completely off Twitter. It's just it's one of those kind of funny things where, I mean, do you cater to the human or do you cater to the AI? Like maybe if it's cause is stale, AI will know how to treat it better. I doubt it, but because usually to get to this point, you literally have to go through the whole explanation of how all the pieces work, anyways. But it's an interesting. The only argument that I heard that I thought was interesting from AI was that is pending is usually process oriented, like React start transition is it pending and is stale is usually data. But since our API literally takes data, like it takes a read function, I don't think it makes a huge difference. But it is a good point that stale is often asking, like, is this data stale versus pending is usually talking about, is this process pending? People don't think of data as pending usually in the same sort of way, but worth it. Oh, sorry, the ASPC design system link. Yeah, I can do that. ASP solid. I said I can't vouch for anything. I don't know what the state of these things are, but it's really cool to see. Bike shedding on settle. I miss on mount dearly. I didn't get the difference yet. On mount was always a lie. That's the biggest difference. Um, it has nothing to do with being connected to the DOM or not. That's a subtle difference for most apps because most of the time it does fire when DOM is connected, but it was misleading. And secondly, we can use it as a hook, like when you're actually doing like an action or something. You can use onSettled as a way of like registering a callback. You don't need it in the action itself, I suppose, because you have the sequencing, but you can use it onSettled. Like again, this is in the generic sense, like in the composable sense, like if you're building an input thing, you can basically use onSettled in an event handler. So you do the click, let you can see it in my StackBlitz example. When I use the optimistic UI example, not the optimistic data. The data with affordances is the I think the blessed path, the better path that I didn't show today. But if you look here, inside our component, we have some optimistic like process state, which is what we go set complete, we do this, but we have no clue when this will be done. The cool thing is if this is synchronous, we never show our optimistic state, it just flickers away. But if there's async, then it'll show while it's done. But what if you want to do something when this process is done? Unsettled, do the thing. It's not just a lifecycle hook for the component on mount. I realized that I was registering to the exact same queue. Now the difference in semantics here might be worth the rename and the split, but generally speaking, it's literally it just registers to the exact same queue. It goes on the user effect queue to run after the render effect, and like in the component body, it doesn't update. It's not like a reactive thing. It's completely dead. There's not much difference between say, hey, unsettled when this component finishes, rendering or whatever, and like all the queues are drained, or versus a process being unsettled. So that's the main reason. On mount here makes no sense. We could have added another API, but they're almost the same thing. Composition again. Almost all these answers come down to composition. What if this is like the remix problem. I think the people who don't understand this don't understand why remix 3's kind of has an awkward design, actually. I think or like not even understand, appreciate it. Because it's like, what if your particular action or particular thing isn't the only thing that contributes to this transition happening? To be fair, onSettled does actually hook into the whole transition, but I guess, okay, fair enough. From a loading state perspective, you might be like, but it's also completely redundant because how should I put it? Like, if we're going to revert it anyways, like, first of all, if it's not optimistic state, yeah, I think I know how to answer this question now. If it's not optimistic state, it's not going to show during the course of the transition. So in order for onSettled loading false to actually work, it needs to be optimistic anyways so that it breaks through the transition. Secondly, if it's optimistic anyways, we already have the unsettled hook to revert it. So like you could do this, but it'd also be point like we don't need it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like yeah, I take it back about the remix case because it hooks into the life cycle, it does not have the same problem as like the remix 3 thing. So it is fair, but the thing is, once you in order to show the change, it has to be optimistic, and once it's optimistic, we don't need to you don't need to call unsettled yourself. We'll take care of it. I think that's the easiest way of putting it. Yeah. Ah, their setting feels like action at a distance. Unsettled makes sense. Yeah, unsettled makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, because there's something like hidden in the behavior, and I think, and to be fair, this piece of the design is very heavily React, and maybe it's why people haven't really adopted it. It just it the optimistic APIs are kind of like a registration API in the sense that you're kind of just saying like you don't have to. It's not up to you to worry about how it unwinds. You just stake your claims, and everything just rolls out of it. I think people are so worried about doing the bookkeeping that it's actually uncomfortable to think that they don't have to do the bookkeeping themselves. Like they're just like, wait, where do I set loading false? And we're like, no, don't do that. We don't trust you to do that, which is kind of crazy. Maybe. Um, what do we miss? Some I don't even know. We're on to this week in JavaScript now, just talking about some of the discussions and stuff. We I don't know if you saw the new Solid Router also. Solid Router reaching 1.0 will come with the 2.0 release, which is funny versioning splitting. But okay, where are we going here? Yeah, this is about the Fable thing because I think we talked about last time where I was saying how I really like Fable, and and it like there's all that pushback between the different models and like GPT versus Fable, and I said I increasingly think AI model preference really has a personality component. The way you use language and what you're looking for and how it responds. In the past, this has been subtle, but right now, for how I work, the gap has never been bigger. Um, I realize in general I have a bias towards anthropic models. No offense to OpenAI, I've always jived with Opus better than GPT or whatever. So it is an interesting thing to think about them. It's perfectly fine to have different members in your team with different personalities, and I feel like there's a bit of that when working with the different models. So I think it like in some cases the mix is, but like for my like main operating mode, I'm very anthropic, which is interesting. I never thought I would like talk about AI like a human personality when I did not see the TS content mapper proposal. I mean, I could, I mean, hmm. I will quickly. Let's see, where's view my channel? Let's see if I can get it in a glance. If I can't, I might push this off. Oh, okay. So this is like completing the like almost like Volar story where you actually like you're like this is a different type of module. This is how I plug it in for this type of extension. Huh. And yeah, because I'm gathering it gets mapped to JSX. That's what the yeah. That's interesting to see this getting formalized and recognized by the actual TypeScript script team. It's very interesting. Yeah. The TLR, it's a way for private to use views so nicely integrated TS7 in the future, hopefully. Like Buller with nice native bridge. Yeah, I dealt with this a bunch with Marco. That's why it's interesting. Working on compile time CS0 using OSC transform call CS lit and content mapper will make it easier to support view. Yeah, okay. Dot solid when, yeah, I know. I honestly, what Dominic's done with TSRX is so much, very much where I kind of want to be. I think, I not where he started, but where he ended up is almost the realized version of like those ideas. Like he's refined it past what I originally wrote, but like he essentially, it's like, yeah, like my criticisms and concerns about TSRX back compat with JSX. The current version of TSRX is like, is, you know, like it's funny. The version that we did on the stream was a little outdated, but where it is right now, I like it. I'd go in on it. Yeah, it's kind of solid. TSML. I mean, I was literally looking at if I could write a Rust compiler or parser for it or extend or XC to support TSRX. There is a JS parser. I don't need to go that far, and I don't want to like compete with like. There's some like, I just like I'm worried that I think TSRX is really interesting. I haven't felt that way about any templating language until TSRX. So, um, yeah, if there was an extension, I think that's the way it would go, which is puts it in a very interesting place because Ripple, Octane, and Solid could all be like siblings on that branch, and you're just like, how are you choosing? Right? You've got the I can do anything with a compiler mentality of Ripple. You have the signals mentality of Solid, and then you have the can we do React compat with super optimized with Octane, all on basically the same templating language. I don't know. I think out of the templating language, TSRX would be our templating language. Like we don't need a views got views, felts got views, felt. For us, TSRX would be it. TypeScript content mappers protocol in theory is kind of like language server protocol. It can be implemented by any tool language, including Rust. Should have held on to analog C's. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So those aren't the thing. I remember that was originally one of the really cool hooks. People like it did introduce a different pattern than the Angular developers were used to. So there's like that tension, and it's a classic metadata, or sorry, meta framework tension that we were talking about earlier. But I know people thought that was pretty cool at the time you released it. Which will hopefully be good for OX Lint too. Man, so much tooling stuff. It's really interesting because the tooling is not an area that I've ever. I've always had a huge respect for the Vue community for the effort they put into the tooling side. But I was like, you know, in my head, I'm like, okay, I could be spending my time here. See, now that I have AI, I'm like, okay, I can go send AI off in it. But traditionally, I was like, no, I'm not spending my time here. If it doesn't directly translate to like less bytes and more speed to the end user, not the developer, I don't care about it. You know, like I have better things to prioritize. If I can save the end user 100 milliseconds, you know, that's worth, you know, 100 seconds of a developer's time, you know. But AI changes the math a little bit. I can't say I have. I always get confused between Beat Plus, the platform, and V plus, the like sort of meta framework thing. Is it V plus 2? Is it called? I don't know. Um, but yeah, the platform is void. Okay. Well, I mean, now that Solid's basically just a Vite plugin that literally does all the things that we want, I mean, any other distribution channel seems interesting. Okay, yeah. So it's like the super template. See, that is interesting. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And that again, now that Solid is just a Vite plugin, this is all the other stuff that I would want with that. So yeah, that makes good. Like the fact that Solid can do server functions, server components, all this right from our Vite plugin, and this just closes the gap. It seems like a very natural, pairing. Yeah. It's like all the stuff I don't care about. Like it's all the stuff that when I was working at my startup, I had to configure, and I spent a couple weeks at the beginning making sure that, actually more than a few weeks, but more than a couple weeks, but making sure that it was all perfectly set up for all the developers on the teams and all that stuff. But then it was like set it, hopefully forget it, never have to worry about it, and move on. But having it prepackaged is obviously very nice, and have it fit nicely with the tools I'm already using is quite nice too. But don't want to spend hours on exactly. Okay. Yeah, no, this is big. Definitely very big, especially now that we're talking about even TSRX or something. Like this is just another piece to kind of close that gap. I'm going to continue focusing on what I know how to do, but it's definitely interesting, and it looks like people are generally pretty optimistic about it or positive about it, which is awesome. Let's give that a thumbs up. All right. Um, OXE is the Vite of JS tooling in Rust. Yeah. I've been having a good time with it. So yeah. So yeah, I conclude people tend to like its pending. AI has been trying to push it stale for like 6 months. Blah blah blah. Yeah, that's generally it. Oh yeah, I was pretty upset when I wrote this. I'm not gonna lie. I felt a little bitter. So I've talked about this. There are different ways to keep libraries small. You can make them incrementally out of the way Preact ships a core, and then install only the add-ons you want: hooks, signals, React, compat. You can make them tree shakeable, so you only pay for what you use. Solid 1.0 was incredibly tree shakeable, right? Like if you go on the like bundle phobia or whatever, it says solid 8 kilobytes, which doesn't even include SolidJS Web or like the other imports. It's literally looking at the main imports. But then when you actually make your app, it's the same size as Preact. They basically came out at 4 kilobytes for your like Hello World example, right? The same base start line. So tree shaking is great. The end example is both frameworks make a counter or like a small to-do app around 5 KB min zipped, right? Solid 2.0 unfortunately is a lot less tree shakeable because how streamlined the API is, because no single API determines whether there's async in the system. No create resource, no async, no use, no, lazy and loadings are completely optional. Like that's a funny thing I haven't shown in the demos is in Solid 2.0, you can literally just like await a promise somewhere, and there's no, if you don't have loading, that's fine. Like it still works. On the server, it holds the flush until the end, which is not something ideal for streaming, but it's the way we did SSR for years. And the client obviously can hydrate at that point because it's resolved. On the if you're doing a single page app with SPA, it just stays white while it does initial stuff, and then it renders the page. And because the way browser paint holding works, you usually don't even see the white. So in both cases, it's basically invisible. It doesn't let you do stuff preemptively. But it meant that there's literally no way to tree shake async capability. Like in Solid 1, I'd look for like suspense or stuff or transitions, and I'd actually tree shake out all the stuff right out in the middle of the code. One of the beautiful things about tree shaking is it's not just like pruning functions. Once you start gating stuff with globals that can only be written to from certain functions, conditional blocks inside the middle of your code just get eliminated. You literally can have code that's like completely wrapped around transitions in order to get like in the core, like no way to separate that out, about like if statements, like if this transition's running, then do this, otherwise do this. So like stuff right in the middle of the core logic that happens to happen to be right in the middle of the scheduler, no way to hoist it out, has to be all part of the same process. And with tree shaking, in guards, you can literally, it won't end up in your bundle. And I've been a huge fan of it. Big part of what I've done. But Solid's APIs, there's no way to tree shake async. And because we do that whole thing where signals are memos and stores are projections, there's no way to tree shake out the derived forms of stores either. So you take all the cost of projections when you use stores. And projections are complicated. So yeah, this was a big adjustment for me because I designed APIs that weren't tree shakeable. I could go back and make them tree shakeable, but they would not be ergonomic and they wouldn't teach the first principles that we want in the system, which is like async just flows. You guys are looking at my bookmark bar. Yeah, image and plex. Yeah. Proton Mail is used for the official Solid stuff. I also use Gmail, but yeah. Or you can use compilers. Yeah, but yes. But here's the thing, Dylan. I made the API so hidden that I can't even use compilers because there's not even an await keyword to hang off of. There's literally nothing. I can't even. There's I mean, I guess I could look for like specific like new promise. Like I destroyed any ability to tree shake async out. I know. So and Marco 6 is so incredible in its tree shaking, like even more so than what I've done because it does like a fine-grained resumability that it can actually tree shake out like almost any static part of your application because it assumes that it's server rendered. Like that's a whole nother level when you assume that all your UI is always server rendered. Like if you build a framework that is not SPA oriented, that is always like server first, you can basically say like this markup's never going to update. That template never needs to go to the client. Marco can literally take a demo that's completely interactive, like a to-do MVC, and then take all the static blocks and just shake them out, making them smaller than if Marco was actually trying to make a SPA, which is crazy. But yeah, it means that Solid is on the other end of the spectrum now because basically 9.7 kilobytes gzipped, I think, and 8.9 kilobytes Brotlead is our floor, which is sad. In reality, you weren't making 5 kilobyte apps anyways, but it 5 kilobyte demoed really good when I showed Solid Start, and I was like, how big do you think your Solid Start app is? 5 kilobytes. Because again, it was just create React app. It's the same mentality. It wasn't like you've seen the steps to getting to where we are today. But the problem is everything in Solid 2.0 is bigger. Async obviously is bigger and more complicated. I did a lot of work to tree shake it. And the problem is it's just the complexity. I've done several audit passes to reduce the size of Solid, both tree shaking, size, algorithmic, and every time the AI comes in and they're like, yeah, we can do all this stuff. And every time the AI is like, no, we actually can't. Which is tricky because look at this. The whole bundle, like the whole thing for Solid was 47 kilobyte minified or 18 kilobytes gzip. This is not what Bundlephobia showed you, and it's not what your real app was. Solid 2 is, about double that. Which means that even adopting features is going to come out at about a 2x cost, right? Proportionally. It's just a lot of absorbed complexity. Transitions actually work properly now. Stores are actually immutable. Like we corrected all the stuff, I feel okay because Svelte 5 is actually bigger. This is like I know this is like the old Monopoly game, but like it's like in a sense React and Angular were always the same performance. So as long as they like looked at each other every release and made sure that they stayed in tow, they were actually fine. Svelte and Solid are actually in the same ballpark and size, and they pretty much always have been. So I'm glad that like we haven't got too crazy out of it. But you can see it here. The difference is if you did like the counter demo that we always do, Solid 1 was 4.2. That's I said that's pre-act size. Solid 2, 12.6. This is before I did the tree shaking work. Svelte 14.9, and React doesn't tree shake, so it's 60 kilobytes gzipped. You could add Next.js to it and it could be like 110, but that's kind of beside the point. So went through a whole audit of tree shaking and splitting, and the original estimate here was, fairly conservative, thinking we could, get below 10 kilobytes. Or we knew that I knew we wouldn't get 4.2, but they thought they could get to 7 or 8. Then I set Fable on like ultra mode on it to go like freaking crazy, and it like that thing is a beast when it goes off. And it came back very confident that it could get back to the 4 kilobytes, but it wanted to gate async. Like if you wanted to use async, they wanted you to like to go enable async or something, like make APIs and stuff. But it did a really good job of breaking down the actual cost of stuff. Core floor 8.9, signals, memos, root, flush. Utilities 9.1, async surface 9.9 gzipped, create store 14.6, reconcile projections optimistic 14.7, map array repeat 15.7, boundaries like suspense, error boundaries, effects. Effects is killing me. On a side note, effects is literally as big as like these whole subsystems. Effects is one of the most expensive features to add. Effects is killing me. Anyway. Oh, I guess these are no, these are adding them up. Sorry, my bad. Effects isn't that big. Sorry, it's only 0.4. My bad. I see. This is cumulative. Boundaries adds 2. Yeah, reconcile projections not that big. Create store is the big one. It's about 5 kilobytes for all the store wiring. So they're like, yeah, they thought they could get us down to 5.5 kilobytes. Did a whole bunch of like stuff. Did it in multi phases of commits. 12. I think, was this the final landing? Yeah. We managed to get it down to 9.8. Here we go. I shrunk some stuff a little bit further down since then. But basically I said approximately 10, but yeah, so maybe 9 kilobytes is what your basic app is with Solid. But this is a departure, I'm not saying we should like go crazy about this, but like just this is the opposite direction of like what I spent so many years doing. I think it's a worthy trade-off, but it still bugs me a little bit. I added size limit to the repo to make sure that as we continue the bug fix that we wouldn't like slip from these targets. So now we have performance benchmarks and size benchmarks whenever we get new PRs into Solid. Did a bunch of work phases, but I just wanted to kind of share this with you guys. Fairly successfully being statically analyzable. Yeah. I mean, it hurts knowing this because I mean, this is mostly vanity at this point because it's not going to affect loading times, even on like the most remote devices at this bundle size. This is still within, but it puts a floor on everything because you start doing a little math here, right? And you can see it in here, right? Although to be fair, we actually tree shake a bit better than this. But if you assume that every project, they don't all need this part. Maybe you can shave off a kilobyte here, but they need context, ownership, probably stores, maybe not stores, maybe not stores. So you could shave that. What I'm getting at is, yeah, actually, let's see if I can actually, yeah. They don't have the full numbers in here of the other steps, like with stores, without stores in the final. Okay, that's too bad. But because we do size limit on that, my point is, if you think that like Solid with all the common async features, maybe not stores, but like all the like the boundaries, like the things you need to run server components, like basically signals, boundaries, that kind of mechanism is probably going to be now about 12, 13 kilobytes. Okay. That was the size of my old Island Hacker News demo, if you remember. Router is 5 kilobytes. So that's 18 kilobytes. Let's say 19, round up. Okay. And then you add Cerevel's serialization, which is 6 kilobytes for server functions. So now you're at 25 kilobytes. And you add the server components themselves. That's another 5-6 kilobytes. So now you're at 32 kilobytes ish. That means like, and maybe that's a little bit optimistic, but that means that like a server component app as a baseline is over like is about 32 kilobytes. You need all those pieces. Like in our old demos, we cheated. We didn't use a real router. We used like light router, which to be fair, someone could ship that with our, all our stuff's router agnostic. But it's like, if you actually wanted a full functional app, like something that gives you the full equivalence of what you get in Next.js, the full capability, we're up to like over 30 kilobytes now, which I don't know. It's such a shift when you're used to like being able to like do that conceptually in the low teens. It's like it's doubled. And I think that's the takeaway. Someone made a joke in Next that Solid 2.0 meant Solid 2x. 2 times the size. And yeah, I think that's the realistic thing. I can't. I mean, we're still below Svelte to review. We're still smaller than those, obviously, but it was nice being like Preact. Do you know what I mean? It was nice being like significantly smaller than everything else. And I just, you can't deliver what you want to deliver, I guess, with that size. I'm definitely hitting a wall here. Anyway. Chat still live or did I bore you guys? All right. Bite-sized costs on they have not primed these actually will lead to higher bite-sized abstractions in user line. Thank you. He works in Preact at Shopify, so yeah. It is difficult, yeah. These foundations are so worth it, though. I'm really excited about it. I actually think now with Solid's async system, we could pull off something like Quick's lazy loading resumability just natively, just from the way that the module graph works. It's like literally built into the signal system. It's something I'll revisit in one of my spikes at some point. But server components are first because that's the only way to get true occlusion. Okay. Yeah, we already talked about that article. We showed the Hacker News demo. Okay, let's keep on going. Five hours NETLR? No, these things are always a mixed bag. So, the live stream is more like picture other people's live streams and like put like picture 3 or 4 other people's live streams. I could stream every day for an hour, and this is just my way of doing like 4 streams in one day and get it out of the way. I feel like we are in one of those pendulum swings right now where people undo a decade's worth of work to only realize 5 years they've overspun because they missed the actual problem. We see this all the time, but I'm not going to argue against imperative handles in all cases. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember this now. Ryan Florence doesn't like reactivity. He's been burned very hard by reactivity. And when he says reactivity, he's not meaning signals. He just means declarative. He basically means declarative things that like you set a rule and they just automatically update. That he's supposed to believe that. He wants stuff to return into an imperative space because then he doesn't. Then he retains full control. This is something that also a lot of senior engineers like because they know what to do best and they don't want to deal with like constraints of the system, so to speak. And to be fair, there's an argument here made for AI this way because if we're going to argue that AI is better at writing codes than humans or like has a capability of not missing stuff, the same things that humans miss, then wouldn't you want to give it the most control? That's the premise here, right? Fables take after building real powerful remix is pretty good. Yes, I ship. Okay. Reactives OT, I love Banger Fable. View updates when I say handle update. I have sit it 281 times in this code base, and it surprised me 0 times. I do not miss guessing when React would re-render. See, and this is like a fair criticism because arguably Fable's not going to forget to handle.update. And it's true. If you put handle.update in a few too many places that don't need it, just because you're not sure, it's still doing exactly what you expected. You might have not needed to re-render a couple of those times, but there's nothing unexpected about being explicit. Say remix is the best, remix is the best. Oh my god. It's so funny. But I wanted to talk about this because I actually saw that tweet and then Dax quote tweeted it saying, we made a similar decision with V2 plugin API. We had all these fancy reactive APIs I tried, but then we traded off for an imperative reload. Verbose APIs are fine now. Not quite on the same level, but it is an interesting question, right? Because there's 2 forces at play here. I think, and I see the tension here. Things that aren't synchronization problems probably don't need an imperative, like don't need to be automatically binding and automatically reactive in the same sort of way. Like if you're not trying to render a bunch of frames and you don't have to worry about scheduling, then like I don't know what the plugin API for open code is, but I'm not sure if are they potentially re-rendering multiple frames per second. Like but I do think in general you have to think about the implications of what's being said because it's like people coming in as like, weren't things way better in the jQuery days? I knew exactly what updated where. And it's like, yes, but like there's a reason why we don't program that way anymore, right? Like there is learning to get here. Okay, anyways, let's go. But I want to think about implications. If you unwind these things, you remove guarantees. Like, why do developers like Rust or TypeScript? It's because through constraints, certain classifications of issues aren't possible. This is when I talk about structural constraints a lot. The solution solves itself structurally. Structural constraints also have a nice property when composed. You keep benefiting from them as you layer on complexity. Build more constraint systems on top. Like, if you aren't batching synchronous updates, you probably have no foundation to manage async race conditions structurally. There's always a way to manually do stuff, right? We shouldn't confuse incidental simplification, removing a problem, with structural simplification. Sometimes legitimately we don't need to solve certain things, right? So we can remove them. but the solution should fit the problem. But more often than not, in a well-established space, we are delaying the inevitable, right? You remove the stuff and then you just add it back anyway. I don't know enough about open code's domain to have specific opinion on the move, but the same sort of energy into the comments. If people think AI is an excuse for verbosity, I think they need to classify it before making a call. We all know at this point that keep it dry is overrated. You know what I mean? Like for a while there, like I remember early 2010s, everything was about dry code. Everything was like, no, don't duplicate anything, right? Duplication is actually good in things in many places if they aren't the same thing, if they have the real potential to diverge. I think Dan Abramoff actually did a talk about this a while ago, right? Like when things, even if they share the same code, but they aren't conceptually exchanged, you shouldn't share the code just because you can like deduplicate it. But verbosity has a real cost. Like even if an agent never misses touch point, like hits every update handle, you know, maybe people don't care, but right now, my biggest battle is keeping verbosity in check. Clean structural wins make things more organized for everyone. Like there are reasons projects keep on moving to Rust. I'm not saying like Rust is probably very verbose in the way that it makes you go through a bit of ceremony with the borrow checker. So it's not like about raw verbosity, so to speak. It's about understanding like the structural guarantees you get from it. So like just removing something and saying like call update yourself is actually not a structural simplification. It's like I'm just removing a feature. It doesn't actually like win something. Now sometimes it's worth exploring if you can change the boundaries, create a new abstraction on top. You kind of unwind things a little bit. Look at that a lot, right? Ryan's reply, it's a new world, have to reconsider everything. Oh, I was a little cheeky with him, wasn't I? That's always the first step. One step backwards, two step forwards. Yeah, that was cheeky. Okay. Daryl's in here. A good test of framework should involve using it with weak free models. A model like Fable might be able to figure out things, but it comes at a cost. The next generation of popular frameworks will be the ones that cost you the less in real money. That's interesting, right? I think that, and this is going to be the debate with AI for the next couple of years at least. The tension between the value in having more structured libraries or languages or things that actually constrain the system versus like everything vanilla. Like if history taught us anything, we just keep on rebuilding the constructs anyways. And then if AI is building them, we're responsible instead of other people. But maybe like we want to be responsible. Maybe that's like the difference to shift here. Like you have to consider it from lots of angles, but it doesn't change the physics. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't change the mechanism. It just changes the ownership. It changes who's doing what. As long as you understand where the responsibility is and where the complication goes, then you can make a wise decision. But it doesn't change how things work. And I think this is the biggest thing. People keep on looking at AI. It's like someone going, now that I have Beat Plus, like I have this incredible build development, does that mean the apps I make will be faster? Possibly, because you'll do a better job at writing the code with the tools thing, like it'll aid you in actually being more efficient or doing things better. But these are not actually directly corresponding things. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's the problem with a lot of these AI discussions. Like they're like kind of just clipping each other tangentially. Comment. I think I can emphasize where they're coming from, but I don't think manual updates are much better in terms of biting you in the butt. Just another kind of problem there. Exactly my thoughts. But not a way models know these are going to be quite expensive. What's weird is these guys saying React 1 because AI is the default. Then it's never been easier to code a language framework because of AI. Yeah. There's this whole contradiction thing we actually covered on one of my previous streams. It's just like they can go sit there and pat. Kent C. Dodds actually last stream. They can go pat themselves in the back that they chose the right framework and keep on using React. Although Kent's using Remix, which is kind of an irony there. But it's like keep the back patting going. Look at how productive people are being. I have no doubt that Ryan and Kick is sexy for the air manual calling update thing. I don't think that generalizes to all the population devs in large. Yeah, I mean that's fair. And I think this is the challenge. Like whenever there's a revolution, and AI is a revolution, it's not just an evolution, it's a revolution. There's always like was that the I don't want to quote it wrong. What's the proletariat animal farm quote? Whatever. Like you always throw out the baby with the bathwater, and the problem is like there is certain fundamental foundational truths that you can dance around, but you're not changing the physics. Oh yeah, you've been able to go full on because of AI. That makes sense. So like I think I actually said that. I'm not sure who needs to hear this, but AI changes transport distribution. It doesn't alter physics. When code becomes cheap to produce, the limiting factor becomes how much complexity your architecture can absorb. Just bangers after bangers this week. Physics doesn't have a free tier. It's not cheap to produce, and there isn't a question that AI like will it ever actually be cheap? Like at a certain point, there is value to this commodity. So like it's cheap in the sense you compare it to a person doing the work, but will it like there might like it's not free. Like at a certain point, again, I don't want to talk too much about Octane, but it's already come up the stream. I know Dominic's kind of been trying to keep it under wraps a little bit, but this channel's not popular enough to change that. They've been porting not just React, but the React ecosystem. You could conceptually see that if someone had infinite credits, they could just build the whole system, just keep on throwing money or credits at it. You know, like maybe they work for an AI company or something, and they have like more access to these, you know, resources or whatever. They could just build out the whole system. So in a sense, money could determine the course of things because if you throw enough money at a problem, you'll get there, you know, so to speak. So like, it is very interesting if like we actually lose out on certain solutions simply because based on how much their AI spend is. I like to think that vision has something to do with it, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just cracking out the stuff at such a rate. I'm always getting in the replies people saying AI is garbage or it doesn't produce good stuff, but I'm an optimist when it comes to technology at heart, even if I try and lie on the side of pragmatism. And trajectory wise, it's not unexpected for this to become true, even if it isn't true today. But it's important though is that even if as this changes, it doesn't impact. It doesn't actually change other aspects in the same way that like Beat Plus isn't going to necessarily make your application faster. It made your dev experience faster, but it didn't make your application faster. AI has more capability of making your application faster, but I'm just saying that it can't actually change the rules that it needs to abide. It doesn't change the shape of the problem. It doesn't change the mechanics. Any change that could happen through AI could also happen not through AI. What AI does is make things maybe more ergonomic that weren't ergonomic before. So, I mean, that's always the grounds for certain types of change. But, all right. And I think we're getting almost to the end here. I did so many AI quotes this week. If you told me a year ago, asked me how long it would take to do the work I've done the last few weeks, I would have said 3 years. I can't express how it feels to reach visions I've had for years. Direction, it's never been bottleneck. Yeah. If you guys have been in the stream, you know what I'm talking about. All the Solid 2.0 work, redesigned the router, moved all the stuff to Rust, plus moved all the packaging, all the runtimes, completely migrated the whole core ecosystem. Oh, created server components while doing that. This all happened in the last couple of weeks. As I said, it would have taken me years to do everything that I've done between basically this stream and the last stream. I kid you not. I just it just wouldn't have happened. Like on my own. Obviously, I could have hired a team of developers and something, but yeah. Like the pictures actually coming together at a rate. I told some people like a couple weeks ago that I'm like, in a year's time, I'm gonna have accomplished most of the stuff that I've wanted to accomplish for the last like several years. Now it's like I'm thinking like in a couple months time, and when I come back, I'm gonna be like in a week's time, like like this is the exponential aspect of this is going to reduce. It's going to stabilize again. There's a limits to us as human beings and what we can process and what we can do in the flow, but in certain vectors, this unlock is just incredible. Yes, I've been thinking about server components for years. I already had the design. I did the hard work. I just realistically couldn't build it. I couldn't migrate everything to Rust. I couldn't make sure to create a test suite. Like it's just move the whole architecture. Yeah, you're right. This only works because I've been bottlenecked on resources for so long, arguably, and that's what I said in the comments. Like, maybe I should just raise money for Solid and start the Solid company. I've been so bottlenecked on resources for years compared to what I wanted to do. Like, this is not me complaining about my benefactors. The Netlifys and Sentries and Google giving money to support the Cerebell effort. It's just like helping me as one developer, or even like a couple offshoot developers here and there for short stints, has made what we've done possible. But my ambition has long extended past that. And I've been, ridiculously bottlenecked by resources by comparison. Yeah, I hear you. So like, this is just like, I needed a team of developers 5 years ago, and now it's just like, maybe three developers. But now it's like, okay, don't need the three developers, just go. That's what I'm saying. The best thing anyone could give to me right now is AI credits. Obviously I get to use some through work, and and I have my own credits and stuff, but I gotta go hunt down Anthropic and figure out how I get those credits, maybe for the open source program. Maybe they're not doing anymore. Maybe I missed it, but yeah. Yeah, and we talked about AI meta frameworks are just a multi-year bridge to cover up the gaps. I didn't get the demo out. What I wanted to do today, and maybe I'll do it next week, is I wanted to remember the React server component notes demo? I wanted to make that like fully up with the new setup and just drop everything on everyone, because it would be that Vite setup, all Rust enabled native, completely no config, just on a Vite plugin, server components, tree shaking, no double data. It'd be like, I used to have so much fun making the holy grail demo that like showed off something that no one else had ever done before. It's been so long since I've been able to do that. This would like this basically would tell the whole story in one quick demo, but I didn't get to it in time. So, maybe it'll be next week. Instead, I posted a different demo, which will probably be the last thing. Ryan, token maxing sounds dangerous. I don't know who's buying a free framework that everyone can use. People ask about if you could work for an AI company. I love the guys at Sentry. I've been really fortunate that both of my kind of bosses or people I've reported to at both companies have been really understanding my open source and work and the importance of it. It's been huge. David Kramer, obviously, from Sentry, has been amazing to kind of give me that space and the understanding, and when the time is right, the support in order for pushing the marketing stuff, which we're getting really close to. And then previously, Claire Knight, and obviously Dana Lawson and Matt Billman from Netlify were, I mean, they're the ones who made me believe that I could actually do this. So, you know, being able to like work full time on this kind of project and make a positive impact, you know. So I don't know. So much you can do on your own now. I know. I as a fellow framework author, like you must feel super powered. You know, like it's just kind of crazy. Um, yeah. Anyways, I think this is my last story for tonight. And it's a completely botched tweet. This should have been a really good tweet, and instead I completely botched the order of it. So we're gonna cover it on stream the proper way. I'm not gonna lie. I saw some benchmarks. People don't use my benchmark tricks to make solid benchmarks, which makes it slower in some cases than like uh, libraries like Vue or Svelte, because Vue and Svelte have a really nice property. They know, and you can see it. Who should I use? Let's use. I'm more Svelte oriented, so I'll use Svelte as my example here. But the same in Vue. Let's. Yeah, okay. We can see it right here. If I go in Svelte, what can I possibly put between these tags right now? I can put. I mean, H1 is a bad example because. But let's make it a div. Okay. What can I put between these tags? Well, I can put an H1. Right? So I can put other native tags. I can put text. And the compiler scans for the tags, so it knows. What if I can interpolate, what else can I do? I can put a component. Right? Again, all compiler visible. They can see that's a component, right? And a component presumably returns more markup or whatever is in it, right? We don't have my comp, but you get my idea. We also have interpolation, right? Maybe I should jump to an example that has like, there we go. Actually, do an example with, yeah, here, yeah. Where's the Svelte like finish the tutorial button? Solve, yeah, here it is. Sweet, okay. And we can have interpolation. But the thing is, what can we put in this interpolation, realistically? We can put a variable. We can call a function. Hello. All right, let's put a function in here. We can call function. We can't put a component into here, I don't think. What does it say here? Unexpected parse error. Yeah, you're in JavaScript land. And our component, and we can't put a div in here. So basically, the short answer to my thing is, when you see a space in Svelte, you know it's a string or a string convertible. You know it's a number. Like, there's no other way to handle it. When they look into C interpolation or in Vue, they know exactly what it is. Right? But JSX, what can I put in JSX? What can I put in JSX? Obviously, a number, like count. I could make a function that's like, hello. And that function could return an H1. I don't know if this will work in a button, but you know, whatever. Yeah, sure. There we go. Basically, I can return any parsable markup, like anything that I could put in the body of a template, I can actually return in an interpolated splot. Here's another fun one. Document dot create element div, or let's make it h1. Const h, and then we go h dot text content equals e again. I don't know why I'm doing that, and return h. Also the same, because we in solid JSX is just DOM elements. So I can return DOM elements. I can return arrays of DOM elements. I can return, you know, I could return components that will produce arrays of DOM elements. My point is the whole capability of the whole templating language is interpretable, which is not a characteristic of a lot of templating, like what they used to call string templating languages. Which means when you see this, or even this, it's not analyzable. You have no way of knowing. You could look for this, but what if this is here? Are you going to go chase down every single thing? Most tools don't give us the ability to do this, right? So I talked before about limitations of Solid. In a sense, every JSX framework has had this problem if they wanted to optimize. Inferno did some cool things where you go in here and you'd be like text only or something. I actually stole the $ prop for server only. Inferno has all these like directive $ things to actually inform the compiler how to optimize. In Solid, I took a much simpler thing. I'm a DOM element, so and originally Solid all props were actually attributes, not property. Were properties, not attributes. We've changed since, but we kept some of the key properties around. So essentially, we just pushed properties straight to the element. If button's a div, like or button's a button, like I mean, inner HTML. H1. I guess inner HTML expects a string, doesn't it? Oh, somewhere still in here. Still doing it. What is it not like about this? Oh, it's complaining that we have children, whatever. Okay. Ta-da, inner HTML. What I'm getting at is see now it's not parsing it because text content doesn't parse HTML. So in the exact same sense, Solid's elements are just DOM elements, which means that if we use native DOM props, I think inner text will work too. You know, like some people are more familiar with inner text. Inner text is actually more expensive than text content. Text content, for some reason, actually skips all the other parsing stuff. It's just nicer. But my point is, it's just an element. So you call a property on it and you set it, and it works. So I guess that what I'm getting at is I didn't need to come up with a special syntax. I just made it so that setting the text content shortcuts it and doesn't. You can see it in the output. It actually doesn't. In this case, it's static. It literally just sets it on the element. It doesn't bother doing like an insert, right? If I was trying to, like, let's do this as text, right? I have to do it like this to escape it into the JSX, but you can do like button. Okay. What you're gonna see here is, oh, this one gets inlined, isn't it? Solid's compiler's too smart. It is. ugh. Um, trying to think of like how to fool the compiler. But my point is like here, if it's a variable that returns that string, like GG, what's going to happen here is has to call an insert. It has to do a diff. It's the same mental difference. When you use text content, you don't have to parse HTML. You're telling the browser, hey, I don't have to parse HTML. When you use text content on an R element, we're saying, hey, you don't have to parse all the different possible things that can be interrelated. We know it's a string. And for that reason, I've used text content in benchmarks from the beginning of time because it's the actual equalizer. But I was seeing some recent benchmarks where Solid wasn't using it, and like Vue and Svelte got to use it. So I was like, we don't teach this enough, and people might think it's kind of a stink. You know, they're like, why wouldn't you just use div thing? What would you tell people to use text content? And you can see here when it's reactive, the difference is insert goes through like handles anything, text, elements, arrays, fragments, checked on every update. One text node, one write. No runtime checks, no reconciling, just sets the data. Like we literally just find that text node. We actually clone the template with a space in it and actually just write into that space. So the text node doesn't even get recreated every time. It literally is smart enough, you know, on the interactive case to actually just update the existing text node. So is this a smell or is this just using the DOM? I don't know. But this is a trade-off. And I think when people use benchmarks, they should use text content. They shouldn't use this. People saying it's not idiomatic. Well, in Solid 2.0, I'm going to make it idiomatic. I'm going to highlight it. This is the DOM. This is what we do. And why does this matter? This is why this is out of order. I felt like there's a justification because people are like, this is kind of dumb. Why wouldn't you just do this? You know, and the truth is most of the time you can do it, right? It's just if you want to optimize, you know, for some reason specifically, maybe it updates a lot, you have a way of doing it. Yes, Svelte and Vue get this for free, but they also can't do this, which is, I think, a cool demo. This is the trade-off. When your DOM element is a DOM and you can insert it anywhere, you can do something pretty cool like this. See, I have two canvases drawing, right? In one example, I just create the canvas out here and then insert it into the different slots based on which one you select. On the other one, I do the typical composition where each one is a new canvas. Like this is what you would do in React or most frameworks. Because what canvas is here is just a virtual representation. There's no way to preserve that. When things get reparented, there's no way to preserve that. Like this is a very simple example where there's just like show, but you could also like have different, it could be, and they have the same shared parent, but they could also have like a different parent. They could also be in divs, right? Like if each of these weren't shared and they're in their own separate div, there's no way to move something from inside one div into another div into another div. Declaratively here, because what you're moving is the virtual DOM representation. Then when it goes to diff, it's not there. And if your templating language can't accept DOM elements as an input, then it's kind of the same thing. What can this possibly be? It can only be a string. So there's no way to actually represent this. But in Solid, because this is actually just a DOM element, you can move it around between elements without removing the tree, which makes for this really cool demo. Yeah, I'm not reparenting. We're gonna assume that the context is where you define it. I know what you're saying, not happening. And there is rules here because this always works, because if you actually have it in two different places, there are two different instances. A DOM element can only exist in one place in the DOM. So yeah, stuff is gonna go pretty wrong here is if these aren't mutually exclusive. Oh yeah, in fact, this interview Hermes, because text prop is faster during runtime in Hermes because we parse JSX inside of the text. Yeah. I think this is just a common JSX problem in general. So I think it's perfectly fair if you have a syntax to say, hey, this is text. In fact, TSRX actually has literally a keyword that says text, I think. So what does this let us do? It lets us have a little bit of fun here, because it means that as it's drawing and I move it to in the corner and the dock, this one keeps on resetting. This one keeps on drawing. In fact, let's go back to Hero. I'm going to draw some little splotches on here. doc, still there. Oh, keeps on resetting. Put splotches here. Oh, no, they're gone. I'm successfully just moving the DOM element around. And I mean, in a very basic way, this is how people could do like tabs. You know, like people complain like, why do you dispose of the tab when you move away from the tab, right? I mean, you could also use display none. This just removes it from the HTML. Arguably, like, but this hoisting trick, you know, because you can actually also have it not attached for a while and then attach it, but the effects and stuff are still running off screen. So it's not really saving. That's why people have stuff like activity and keep alive. But this is like a very, without any additional APIs, this is a very poor man's sort of keep alive component, because essentially you just have an orphan tree that you can just move around. This only gets disposed when its parent context gets removed. So the parent above here, when it removes it, will dispose it. Otherwise, this will exist for the lifetime of this scope, and then you can move it around as you see fit. In fact, you have tab A, tab B, tab C. You could initialize it the first time you actually went into that tab, let's say, and then hoisted it out, you know, via the reference or whatever. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. I'm not suggesting we're not going to have something like the activity or keep alive component. It just kind of, this is part of that conceptual trade-off. It is so powerful how you can compose in JSX frameworks compared to how you can in the other thing. The limitation breeds good performance in this case for Seldom View, because they know we have to actually tell the compiler it's text. But on the flip side, this is yet another demo that only Solid can do. Now that is a demo. I completely missed it here because I conflated them too when I posted this. People didn't get like what I was doing. They're like, there's no text content in this demo. I'm like, I was already trying to get ahead of it. I was like, people are going to think this is dumb. So I need to explain the full side of the picture for them to actually appreciate just like how powerful this is. And this is the problem. Terrible at selling this stuff. I screwed this up completely. I should have reversed it. I should have put this as the first tweet and then this is the follow-up tweet. But it's kind of like, you know, people didn't even balk at this. They were just like, oh, that's cool. I wish I knew about that. And it's like, oh, okay. Like for me, I'm like, oh, this is an ergonomics consideration that might be too specific. But I think this is like, in a sense for us, another example of us embracing the platform. Yeah. I mean, this is just like, it's really disorienting for people sometimes when they see stuff that looks like React and then it's literally just like DOM element. It just like stuff like that just works. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe no one cares anymore. Maybe that's the state of things. Someone asked on my last video, like, why I even bother? Like, who cares? It's like, I'm going to show off that demo that shows that like that we, you know, have solved the you know, the front end existential. We've solved hydration finally, you know, in a way that pure resumability didn't, or that React Server Components didn't. And no one's going to be there for the party. I think that's where we're at. I'm just going to keep on going because I think the stuff we're doing is really, really, really cool. But yeah, I don't know. Always been on the platform where you can. Yeah. When the abstraction fits, when you can leverage it, it makes a lot of sense too. What's cool about this kind of stuff is it doesn't cost us anything from the universal standpoint, right? Text content optimization. You could do a similar type of optimization in a universal renderer, and like the migrating thing has no impact on SSR. I guess there is actually one impact on XSR with text content. We actually look for those special properties that impact children text content, inner text, and inner HTML, and we do have to special case them in the compiler for SSR. So that there is a real cost there. Sometimes, as I said, like there is a trade-off here. Like on the client, this is no cost, and SSR there's a small cost. I think that's how you have to evaluate it. The cost on the SSR is minimal, like web components on SSR arguably a bigger cost. Yeah, the agents will be at your party. Yeah, well that's what we're hoping, right? That's yeah, yes, it's a nice design. Anyways, sorry, stuff's been still solid focus. Back in the day when I used to do This Week in JavaScript, it was a much wider scope, but it's like I have to make the news now. I mean, part of it is because I'm really excited about what I'm working on, but Svelte has kind of moved off this platform. Might be able to find some of it on Blue Sky. There's been a lot, like, don't get me wrong, you see the interactions like with like Jovi from Preact, and if you go back to the size one where you could tell that I'm definitely struggling with it. If you look at the quote tweet here, Simon from Svelte team is like, so we're coming to the same conclusion. Async has grown up to runtime a lot in size and complexity, but it's unavoidable, and when inevitably less overall, it's still be a win. Like, there's a lot. We're what's the word? Consoling ourselves in this to a certain degree. So like, it's just it's been tricky because I think maybe it's partly the decentralization. I'm not following stuff on Blue Sky as closely anymore, and all the AI talk has basically squashed out all the other stuff. Like, I actually at this moment don't know what the big innovations happening. Like, I'm looking at how fast I can move right now. I have to imagine everyone else is moving super fast too. So, where's the innovation happening? React, they managed to get the view transition stuff and the activity stuff, but I don't know what's going on there. You know, I don't know what's next, so to speak. And I don't, next JS is I think they're happy with the cache APIs. They like completed their server component arc. Svelte's still working on async. It's still in beta. But I know they like fork and stuff. They got like stuff. At least I'm familiar with what's going on there. They're riding the same kind of like async as the future vibes we're doing. I listen to podcasts and stuff and try and keep on top of these things. I have no clue. Everything I hear about Vue is about Vue and Vue Plus and like their build tools. I don't know what new exciting like reactivity feature is coming in Vue, or if they just think that they've made the perfect base and now just go on, like Nuxt or whatever, like whatever needs to be built on top. Yeah, I'd say right now, as I said, Svelte's the only other team that I'm really aware of, like some of the cool stuff. And Quick, I know Quick 2.0 is like well in swing. So I think those are the two, like of the major frameworks. Obviously, like someone from data. Oh yeah, Vapor, Vue Vapor. I've been waiting for that for so freaking long. Yes. And reactivity based on alien signals. Yeah, that's out. The reactivity and alien signals, but Vue Vapor, right? Yeah. I mean, Vapor is the big one. Yeah, that closes the loop. Sorry, in my head, Vapor came out like a year ago. Like, Svelte released Runes, which is basically like their version of Vapor, and then like Vue also announced it at the exact same time, and I've been like, oh, V4, okay, nice. 3.6 is RC's out for a couple of days. Okay, there you go. Okay, well that's good to know. Yeah, I've been trying to like close out that narrative because, I mean, the personal reasons obviously, because when Vue lands Vapor, I get to like tell the whole finish the arc story of basically the adoption of the architecture that Solid introduced. So, um, obviously I want to see it like it completes the story. Every framework that adopts this approach is like another argument against like React's technology superiority, so to speak, right? Yeah, you know what I mean. Like this is just like more validation verification that everyone's like kind of on the right trajectory. Yeah, so much AI. Like I don't have much to say about AI these days except for like Fable is awesome. Um, that's why this kind of clickbait thing came out. Like it's true. We wrote a huge, basically all Solid's tool chain in Rust, but like that's more controversial than I guess, arguably than like some of the cool demos and work we've been doing here. Anyways, whatever. I'm having fun. I told you I haven't had this much fun in this aspect in years, so I have nothing to complain about. So I think we're good, and I think we hit 6 hours. This ended up being a long stream, so it's gonna be 2 weeks again. I'll have some really cool stuff to show, then probably all the server component stuff landing, and hopefully Solid 2.0 RC. I think that's around the right time period, hopefully, if I can get everything moving. So JS stands for job security. So I think I'm gonna leave you guys with that. You guys have a great weekend. What other news? I have not much. I believe I'm gonna be speaking at VConf this year. I'm very excited to kind of talk about the vision and that I introduced in the first couple of VConfs and seeing us actually get there. So, and I'm just excited about the whole V ecosystem, as you can tell from the stream. So, yeah, you guys all have a great one. I'm gonna see if there's, yeah. I think you guys all have a great weekend. All right. See ya next time.